Smith. To my far right, Councillor Duck and Councillor Garnett, and joining us via Zoom, Councillor Duncan. Good evening, Councillor Duncan.
Good evening.
And we have good evening to members of staff in the council chamber, and we may have staff also participating by Zoom, and we do introduce them when they are speaking. And good evening to members of the public. I feel with so many here on a cold, snowy evening, I should be handing out candy canes or something. But thank you for coming this evening. And I'll next turn to our territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect the Saanich peoples on whose traditional territory the town of Sidney stands, and the historical relationships the Saanich people have with these lands that continue to this day. I'll next turn to approval of the agenda. Since our agenda was published last Thursday, we have 3 additional items and 1 change on the agenda, and so I'll just step through those before we give approval. The first is we have a piece of correspondence from Mr. Maddison with regards to Markinch Place, the development variance permit. That is item 6B on our agenda. That correspondence will go to that item. We have a piece of correspondence from Mr. and Mrs. McIntyre with regards to the tree removal request, and that will go under item 13A. And we have an additional piece of correspondence from Mr. Harmon, president of the Summergate Village, that would go with item 15.9 under correspondence for information, which is with other correspondence on the same topic. And fourth, I would turn to Councillor O'Keefe, who I believe wants to raise an item.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I would like to raise item 50, the 2 pieces of correspondence from 15.9 regarding the covenant removal at Kenora.
Okay, so that is, yep, thank you. So that is the letter from McKim and Lott regarding the removal of the restrictive covenant at Kenora Road, and the reply from staff, and then along with the piece of correspondence that I made reference to. They will go under item 14C, which will be our 3rd item under correspondence. With those changes, if I could have a motion to approve as amended.
Can I just add one? I'd like to give a verbal report under council reports on the EAC, if that's possible, under item 11, make 11B.
Yes, we'll make that 11B. Thank you, Councillor.
And with that, I move the agenda be accepted as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None are opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll next turn to our public participation opportunity, where we provide an opportunity for members of the public to come forward and address council. We ask that you speak up to 4 minutes. And when you come forward, please provide your name and municipality that you reside in, or your business interest in Sidney. And for a first time, I'll ask if there's anyone wishing to address council this evening. Please come forward. And we do have a microphone that you can activate with a little button, and we'll turn it red there for you.
Okay, perfect. Mayor, council people, thanks for taking the time. First off, my name is Sean McIntyre. I live at 2305 Malaview, doing some extensive renos. I've already provided an email and correspondence I'm sure that you've all read, and I appreciate the time. I just wanted to kind of come up and just say, you know, I'm more than happy to compromise and come to some working agreement. Obviously, this is our first house that we're buying. We're super excited about it, and we just want to try to come up with a solution that works for everybody. And that's all I pretty much have to say, and thank you.
Thank you for coming forward this evening and attending our meeting. I'll call for a second time if anyone is wishing to come forward. Good evening, Mr. Carlson.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Dennis Carlson, Sidney Community Association. Before I make some comments tonight, I just want to extend the best of the season from the Sidney Community Association to the Mayor and all the council and to staff. So thank you very much for everything. My comments tonight are regarding the proposed development at 5th and Malaview. In looking at the plans, it became apparent to us that there are 2 utility poles that will remain within the sidewalk on 5th Street. And one of those is in the middle of the sidewalk drop at the corner. And I also noticed a similar condition on recently completed sidewalk for the adjacent project. To us, that is somewhat disappointing to see, given that one of the principles in the draft active transportation plan, which is on your agenda tonight, is high-quality facilities designed to a high standard, and particularly references including elimination of barriers and improving accessibility, and also providing a high-quality public realm. So I think what it means to us as the community association is that we will be actively promoting the inclusion of guidelines around replacement of sidewalks within the upcoming active transportation plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming forward this evening. I'll call for a third time if anyone wishes to come forward. Good evening, Mr. Weller.
Good evening. How you doing? Mayor and Council, Steve Weller. I'm the owner at 9429 Kenora Road. We're on the agenda tonight. We were here November 28th. We received some correspondence back from Sidney to say go back to Summergate and received the letter. We've got the correspondence back from the Summergate Strata. Summergate Council still believe we have no legal right or jurisdiction in this covenant. Between the town of Sidney and CJP Enterprises, that's me, we will therefore be providing no waiver release. I hope this answers your question. So I have a letter from Summergate originally that was back in July 22nd saying that they have no legal right to this strata. Sidney's the signatory. Sidney's the one that can release it. We had, which wasn't in the staff report, but we had an open house with Summergate at Summergate's expense at the Presbyterian Church on East Saanich in the summertime, and I was there to field questions for 2 hours. They had representation from people that sit on boards of the Strata Act, and they went through all of the paperwork, and all of the residents, including Ms. Fallett, right, knew about this covenant, and they knew what we were trying to do and remove this covenant. So I don't know what else you guys want me to do. I got the letter, I got the correspondence back. I've had my legal guys go over it. So at this point, I'm asking you guys to go back and maybe reconsider what Mayor McNeil Smith was trying to do last council meeting, and that's get this covenant removed without the letter that I have already. So we're at the final gate here. We've done everything that we've asked to be done. I don't know what else you want me to do.
No, Mr. Weller, thanks for coming forward this evening. And you referenced our last council meeting. Thank you for the additional correspondence that's come to council, both from your legal counsel and from the Strata Corp. And as you've heard, I think during agenda approval, we will be considering it. It's a little ways down the agenda.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna go home and have a wine in a hot tub,
Okay.
and I'm gonna try to not let this covenant ruin my Christmas. Okay. So.
And you know we're available on the live webcast.
I'll watch it. I'll watch it from 4 feet deep. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it, and have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Enjoy your time off.
Thank you very much.
All right. Cheers.
For last time, is there anyone wishing to address council? Seeing none, I'll close public participation. Thank you. And we're pleased to have 3 presentations this evening. The first I'll introduce is the Sidney Museum and Archives, presenting their 2022 annual report and 2023 business plan. A presentation from Mr. Bob Jones, Board Chair, and Michael Goodchild, Executive Director. Good evening, gentlemen. Please come forward. Just Mike. Okay. Well, good evening. And as I think you're aware, we do have allocated 10 minutes for your presentation this evening. Don't have to go 10 minutes, but and we'd be pleased if you would consider taking questions from council at the end of your presentation. Of course. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you turn your mic? Does that work? Okay, great. Thank you. Just waiting for the presentation. From current slide. From beginning? Great, thank you.
Sorry, if I may just pause for just a moment. Mr. Humble, can that screen turn just a little bit more? I'm just,
Towards you?
no, the other way.
This way?
Yeah, that way. There we go.
And when you want me to switch slides,
You actually just can do this yourself this way.
Great, thank you very much. Right, well, good evening, Mayor and Council, Town Council staff and Sydney residents. My name is Michael Goodchild, Executive Director at the Sydney Museum and Archives. And with me this evening in the audience is Bob Jones, our board chair. So thank you for the opportunity to present on behalf of the museum this evening as I share highlights from our 2022 annual report and 2023 business plan. I am cognizant of the very full agenda that you all have this evening, so I will do my best to keep this short and sweet. My intention for the evening will be to provide a summative overview of the museum for those who are less familiar. It should be very brief, and to transition to our performance this year amid ongoing staffing and pandemic-related challenges. Finally, I will outline our plans for 2023 and invite questions or clarification requests at the end if any are needed. So in brief, the Sydney Museum was established in 1971 with a mandate to collect and preserve the material heritage of the town of Sydney and Saanich Peninsula more broadly. Our initial collections would come to boast some 5,000 objects alongside 24 feet of archival storage space. Initially, we were known to collect and present both historical and ecological information, though in later years, the conservation responsibilities would see us split into the Sydney Historical Museum and Ocean Discovery Centre, aka the Shore Centre for the Salish Sea, who will be presenting next. The Sydney Museum, operated by the Society of the Saanich Peninsula Museums, we were incorporated in the year 2000. More recently, our leadership was renamed the Sydney Museum and Archives Society, and more colloquially, the Sydney Museum. Recent changes, many of which were undertaken by previous directors Peter Garnham and Alyssa Gerwing, include creating collections and privacy policies, a growth of the museum staff detail to 3, and a significant renovations in 2021 to allow for improved capacity, flexible exhibit space, and new HVAC systems. This year, dealing with the ongoing challenges of a global pandemic, the museum has gone through a fairly large staff shake-up with a full staff turnover. As of June, however, the board has filled out a brand new 3-person team, and we've been spending a lot of time learning about our roles and responsibilities in the context of serving the town of Sydney and the Saanich Peninsula more broadly. So moving into this year then, I'm very happy to report that the museum continues to perform well from both a financial and visitor-centric perspective, even in the face of all of the challenges that we've had. The 2022 operating budget is projected currently at approximately $278,311, which takes into account all grants, donations, and similar financial revenues received as of November 30th. Specifics may change as a result of December visitorship, but we do not anticipate this to be a significant deviation. Our 2023 operating budget, $212,070, submitted along with our annual report and business plan, also takes into account the recently signed lease and operating agreement, which includes the amounts confirmed from the town of Sydney for next year. This amount is set, and it goes without saying that we will not be requesting any change to our 2023 funding now that it's signed and sealed. On behalf of the staff and the board at the museum, I very much appreciate your continued support and guidance as we've been moving into this new role, and we are really excited to continue serving you in the new year. Donations are up significantly this year. At present, the museum has received over $35,000 in donations, 10,000 more than was budgeted at the onset of the year. Regarding contributed versus earned revenue, contributed in this instance includes support from the town of Sydney and the District of North Saanich, and earned include donations, memberships, grants, sponsorships, and sales. So one of the Society's goals in our most recent strategic plan was to increase non-municipal support by at least one new grant per year. Now, as of 2022, we have increased our grant funding to 88% of the municipal support received from the town of Sydney and District of North Saanich. I credit both my predecessor, Alyssa, and our current Assistant Director, Megan, for this success. This year, the museum has applied to 6 granting agencies for a total of 12 grants, of which 8 have been successful and 2 unconfirmed at present. These include the Museum Assistant Program's Recovery Fund for Heritage Organisations, the Exhibit Circulation Fund, and COVID-19 Emergency Support Funds. Regarding yearly... Oops. Oh dear. Seems that my slideshow stopped working. Apologies for that.
Just one moment. Is there, thank you, Mr. Isaac.
Oh, thank you. Regarding average annual donation per visitor, as of now, we are sitting at $3.78, which continues a positive trend of giving and donations that we've received in the last few years. We offer both card and cash donation opportunities, and people, the visitors to the museum have been very generous, and we greatly appreciate their support. Attendance follows similar trends. Attendance in this case for visitors on looking at the slideshow is the red bar. There's a similar cadence to previous years. It's more focused on the slide here in blue. Although we did enjoy a spike in visitorship during the summer months, to which we credit the Little Black Dress exhibit as a contributing factor. As of November 30th, the museum has welcomed 10,185 visitors to the space. This does not include the over 700 visitors we've received in the first half of December alone, due in large part to the Lego exhibit that has returned a month earlier than we normally schedule. So we can anticipate a larger amount at the end of the year. Social media in the digital realm, our channels are performing well, although it must be said that we have experienced a drop in average monthly reach this year compared to last year. In large part, this was to do with the staff turnover influencing a drop in regularly scheduled social media posts, stories, videos, and opportunities for engagement and interactivity. This is a top priority for for our education and outreach coordinator, and she'll start to tackle that in the new year. It must be said, however, that our growth continues in a positive trend across all three of our channels. So as I mentioned, so our new education outreach coordinator, Jessie, she started in a part-time position as in May of this year. And as of now, as of September, she is employed full-time. Megan Horton, our assistant director, started in early June, and I myself moved here in mid-June to begin my work here. Now, despite ongoing and understandable COVID concerns, the board time contributions during the turnover period, as well as a dedicated core of volunteers, has ensured that the museum has been able, in large part, to remain open and serve the wider community. As of November, volunteers have contributed over 1,800 hours of time and effort into assisting with front desk, collections management, and exhibit fabrication work. And we've also recruited several new volunteers to assist on days where we have shorter, less staff coverage, and we are continuing this into the new year, hopefully for weekend coverage when staff coverage is lighter. Now, regarding education and outreach, since starting her new role at the museum, Jessie has been reviewing the museum's existing education outreach resources, many of which were put on hold during the pandemic. Of particular, I would like to note she is looking to develop brand new school-related programming, one per grades 1 through 2, 3 through 4, and 5 through 6, respectively. She's also looking, as I mentioned earlier, to revamp the museum's online presence with additional social media posts, engagement opportunities, and potentially researching other social media platforms that we can expand into. And then finally, she's really doubled down on connecting with community partners, that is to say, businesses, museums, volunteer organizations, to create a community-focused web that we can use as a resource and engagement opportunities for a variety of things, from public programs to future exhibit opportunities. The museum saw the implementation of 5 exhibits in 2022. We had our Lego exhibit at the start of the year, January through March. We welcomed over 5,368 visitors. We also had COVID safety rules put in place, including limited registration and limited building access. We followed that in the spring with the Suitcase Project, a traveling exhibit from the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Centre, during which we welcomed 1,400 visitors to the space. In the summer, we had a very popular exhibit, 100 Years of the Little Black Dress, from the Costume Museum of Canada. This was far more popular than I think anyone on staff was anticipating, and we welcomed 3,000, here we go, Yeah, 3,425 visitors, 899 explicitly mentioning these dresses as a reason for coming. We were also able to connect with Point Ellis House. They donated some objects and a dress for us to include as a local connection, and one of our volunteers was able to loan us 3 generations of dresses too. And the overall effect, we think, was very successful. In the fall, in November, we had a Remembrance Day display that went up briefly. During that month, we welcomed 340 visitors. And then in December, as mentioned, we brought the Lego exhibit back a month early. So this year, it'll be going from December the 1st until March the 31st. And we have already welcomed over 780 visitors to the museum in the last 15 days, which compares very favorably when you look at previous Decembers for the museum's visitorship. Of our ongoing projects, of which we've outlined 10 on this slideshow, highlights include continuing the organising and inventorying of our collection storage, especially now that the museum has invested in Catalogit collections management software, which is incidentally also used successfully by the BC Aviation Museum. A side effect of this technology also means that we will be able to make our collections publicly accessible on our website, which are all in the intention of increasing transparency and engagement with the wider community. This goes hand in hand with the continuing Peninsula News Review digitization work that was started in 2020, and we'll be entering into phase 2 of that next year. We'll also be making meaningful progress on the BC 150 Time Immemorial Waterfront Signage project. There have been several staff meetings to this effect. We've also looked to employ the services of a TECUM knowledge keeper who will be assisting us with research, and then we'll be going into design and proper research of the new content and connecting with the town of Sidney for community feedback with surveys in the new year. Finally, our plans for 2023 include the creation of 2 in-house exhibits, snapshots of the Saanich Peninsula, which is a photography exhibit, and Wines, Ciders and Beers Oh My, which will be a history and economic exhibit showcasing the contributions of wineries, breweries and cideries to the local regional history and to its economic growth. We'll also be engaging in the aforementioned development of public programming for visitors and continuing our successful trend of hosting travelling exhibitions with 2 planned at this point for 2024. The first in the spring will be Our Living Languages, First Peoples Voices in BC from the Royal BC Museum in partnership with the First Peoples Cultural Council, and the second in the fall will be Cipher Decipher from Ingenium, Canada's Museums of Science and Innovation, which examines encryption, how it works and how it affects our lives, its role in war, and how we rely on it to keep modern digital communications possible. So that was quite a dense and very truncated presentation. So I wanted to take the opportunity to thank you all for listening and thank you for your attention this evening. It's as a new resident in Sydney and relatively new to this position, this has been a real crash course for me, but I've had nothing but support and patience and help from everyone I've encountered, yourselves included. So thank you very much for listening this evening, and if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the enthusiastic presentation. I'll turn to colleagues if they have any questions. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Thank you for the very enthusiastic presentation. And always happy to hear what's going on in the museum. Just a couple comments, first of all. Having volunteered for a while back with the museum, it's really great to see what you're doing in terms of modernization, in terms of new software to manage the collection, digitization. I love the fact that you're looking to put a lot of that online to make it more accessible. So good job there. Also really like the more focus on coming up with local exhibits. And I think the one on the wines, ciders, and beers is a brilliant one, really, because a lot of people, I don't think, realize, and maybe we should remind North Saanich that they were actually, North Saanich was one of the best places to get hops from in North America back in the early, I think 1900s, late 1890s. And so being able to showcase that part of the history. And I think it's interesting that we now have so many, you know, craft breweries on the peninsula as well. So good job on that. In regards to North Saanich, and you know, we've chatted before about really our history with Sidney and North Saanich it's like intertwined. And so any thoughts given to perhaps, you know, changing the name of the museum to reflect that broader sort of history of Sidney and North Saanich?
Certainly, yeah. It's come up in numerous staff discussions, and it's something that we postponed our board meeting this month to give everyone time off for the holidays. But it is one of the sort of overarching strategic goals I'm looking into engaging more in 2023. So I'm sort of bringing it up in an official capacity with the board to see to test the waters, as it were. And it is certainly something that I think could result in sort of a greater sense of community place, that we're not just serving the town of Sidney. Of course we are, but we are trying to emphasize that we serve the Saanich Peninsula more broadly, Sidney and North Saanich. So that is something that we're going to sort of approach on a more structured capacity, and it's something I would also like to bring up to the Municipal Council when I present to them in January.
Right, good. And yeah, that's good. I just, thanks for the update. Exciting to see what you're doing, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Goodchild, for your presentation. And I just have to say that I've been liaison my entire time on council, and I'm actually amazed. I have to commend both the hiring committee and the board of the museum for being able to find all staff replacements in what was relatively a short time period, and to have it be so fluid and to keep the museum on such a positive course. And now, having gotten to know the new staff members, the energy and enthusiasm that you've shown here, that's how every board meeting is, and that's how I think he approaches the job. And you all seem to have this real passion for what you're doing, and that shows in what was happened. And to see that earned income is 88% of contributed, based on where it was when I first was liaison, is just absolutely incredible. Like, you guys have done a fantastic job. Just nothing but thanks for all your hard work, and I'm looking very forward and excited to see the final results of the waterfront signage project. I every time I read an update on it, I'm like, oh, I just can't wait. So Godspeed with it.
Thank you. We're very excited about it too. It's something we've been itching to really sink our teeth into. It's one of our top projects for next year.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Mr. Goodchild, for an enthusiastic and bubbling presentation, but certainly it echoes how much you have on the go in the museum. And I particularly want to comment on your efforts to reach outside of the museum doors in a physical way to engage the community and get them involved in. I know we've had some discussions about getting them involved in future exhibits, and I think that's wonderful because it will engage the community to sort of see the museum live outside its doors. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. Councillor Novick.
Michael, congratulations. Somebody who's been involved.
Microphone.
All right. Congratulations, Michael. As someone who's been involved with the museum for, well, ever since I set foot in Sidney, I'm really gratified to see that you really hit the ground running in what was a very, very challenging transition. I'm also very happy to see in your report, and it wasn't really detailed much in your presentation, but you're continuing to involve and prioritize work with the Indigenous communities in and around Sidney, which is something that I heartily support and would encourage more organizations to do in their work. So congratulations for a job well done, and I can see nothing but success on the horizon for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. I just have a couple of questions before finishing off, and the first is Councillor Garnett mentioned the waterfront sign project, and you made reference to it as well, and it's in the package. and the timelines are indicated for next year, commencing sometime in late spring and then through the summer and fall. Do you possibly see beginning of installation in the fall of next year, or is timing for that not really quite set yet?
It's that's, I guess you could say, that's the hope. The hope is that we can have installation in the late fall. I think if it's something that the staff team prioritizes, which we are, hitting the ground running in January, I don't think it's out of the question. It's something I'll obviously keep regular contact up to make sure everyone's on the same page with where we're at. So at this point, it's a little nebulous, but I hope that we can do that. I've already reached out to a few graphic design companies. Peninsula Signs was one of the groups that Alyssa connected with prior to her departing the museum, and we've already started to outline the content that will be on the new signs with regards to keeping some signs sort of streamlining the content, but also allowing for more room for Saanich specific content and cultural history and language and knowledge, and that's, as I mentioned, that's something that the SACOM knowledge keeper Marissa Jim, who has worked with the museum on the Chief Dan George exhibit, I believe, she'll be assisting us with that. So I sincerely hope so, and that is my plan at present. Yes.
Excellent. And is that a funded project, or is that still to progress as through next year?
No, that is funded. We have received funding for it. It is currently sitting pretty in our bank account, but it is, as far as I know at least, it has been fully funded.
Thank you. Second question is, could you distinguish again for us the difference between the first phase of the PNR digitization and the second phase, that is to commence?
Certainly. So the first phase mainly focused on the digitization of the various iterations of the Peninsula News Review. And I believe it's near a century of the different versions of the newspaper, all of which are currently publicly available on our website. And we get many research and archival reference requests. The vast majority of them are people who are trying to access a particular piece of information or look for a particular article or a particular photo, and then we can assist in facilitating their request. And we're also encouraging people to try and explore the digital archives themselves, to familiarize themselves with it, and also to kind of make it clear that there's this big repository of information that is just a couple of clicks away. The second phase, to my knowledge, will involve a lot of audio recordings that we have, and we'll be looking to digitize those. We've got in contact with a few of the companies that were involved with the initial digitization of the newspapers. I believe that they do also offer capacity to assist with those files as well. And my goal to use the funding that we have for this project, which is provided by the BC Gaming Authority, to also make this publicly available as an online library, a repository of sorts. People can listen to these audio tapes that we're currently sifting through to figure out the full scope of the project. But yeah.
Well, thank you. Michael Goodchild, thank you for your presentation as the Executive Director, and I echo the positive comments from colleagues, and just want to acknowledge the volunteer board time that goes into the success of the museum, and the volunteers that you have as well that work through the days. So thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
You're welcome. And we'll turn to our next presentation, which is from the Shaw Centre for the Salish Sea, an annual update and operating plan. We're pleased to have a presentation this evening from Janine Morris, past Chair and Treasurer, and Pauline Finn, Executive Director. Good evening, ladies. Sorry, if you just try that button one more. There we
Red,
go.
okay, red is good.
You're really live now.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. We're honored to join you to provide you a performance report for the Shaw Centre for the Salish Sea. It is especially nice to be here live and in person. I'm thinking, oh, maybe I have to turn on. Awesome, thank you. The core of the presentation tonight will focus on our 2021-22 fiscal year performance, and those details are included in Appendix 1 of your package. After that, we will provide some commentary about our current 2022-23 operating plan, and next we'll share an update on those results to October 31st. And finally, we look forward to answering any questions you may have.
So for anyone looking to go even deeper into the data, our reviewed financial statements approved at our recently held AGM are available on our center's website, which is salishcenter.org/center. And just a note, Pauline and I will be trading off a little bit throughout tonight's presentation.
Okay. So, for context, let's not forget that our previous fiscal year, that's good. Our previous fiscal year was fully focused on pandemic survival. Things were so uncertain that year that we planned in 3 and 4 month increments. So it's a very different situation today. Much has changed since then, but caution, adaptability, and recovery does remain front of mind.
So you'll see here that the results include the last full fiscal year not affected by the pandemic, which was 2018-19, as well as the 10-year financial model. So the center reported a net income from operations of $70,000 for the fiscal year just ended May 31st, 2022. Overall revenues came in higher than planned, and expenses followed suit, resulting in a lower net income from operations than in the prior year. Having said that, it's important to keep in mind a few things that last year was not a normal year and does not reflect typical results. A major factor in the prior year's positive results was, of course, the receipt of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy funding, which came in at just under $195,000. In this current fiscal year, again, ended May 31st, 2022, we saw the end of that program in early fall of 2021, and the center benefited from just $33,000 from this lifeline. So next slide is our capital investment. So drawing on the prior year's reserve, $40,000 of capital investment took place this year. And that work included work that had initially been planned, as well as further investment layered into the work plan mid-year. And investment included equipment purchases and completion of 4 substantial projects, which Pauline will touch on shortly. Several years ago, with guidance from the town officials, we formalized the need to build and track investment into a capital reserve fund by clarifying our fund account balance and setting targets. So the plan is to build up financial assets to maintain a consistent operating fund of $200,000 while reinvesting future surplus into the capital reserve fund. So the fiscal year-end operating results, $70,000 minus capital reinvestment of $40,000, made it possible this year for us to maintain our operating reserve fund at $200,000, while also increasing our capital reserve fund to $199,000 for future reinvestment work. The positive result was due to several factors: steady and enthusiastic return of the community visiting the center, the continued hard work and adaptability of our team, community donations, grants, as well as secured multi-year support from, of course, the town of Sidney.
So now a little more insight into our activity. Our crew, our staff, and our 123 active volunteers served over 58,000 visitors and community members with outreach and outdoor activities this past year. That's almost double what we were able to achieve the previous year. We were only at 30,000. That COVID year was tough on a bunch of levels. And as Janine mentioned, the center's positive performance allowed us to complete a number of important projects. So these projects go beyond our committed service and daily engagement with the community. This work is beyond the necessary ongoing care for our animal ambassadors, facility, and life support systems. Some of these projects were long overdue. So the projects include the feature gallery transformation, investment in our business management software, as well as IT improvements, the Submarine Experience Revitalization Project, and a renovation of our office space. While all 4 of these projects have made significant impact on our organization and some of our sanity, I'll show the 2 that have had the most visceral impact on our visitors. Just a little bit more information on those 2. So the first one I'm just going to go a little bit deeper into is our back gallery renovation or revitalization. This feature gallery transformation began the previous fiscal year, so at the end of the previous fiscal year, and it was completed in the first month of the year we're reporting on here. We were working hard to make great use of the incredible space we have at the waterfront here in Sidney. This area, this feature gallery space, it now serves as a purpose-built exhibition space. It's designed as a platform. So here we will share a diversity of experiences and stories with the community for years to come. It's changeable. We can change as needed with the community. And on this slide, you'll see on the left side, you'll see visitors engaged with the Tafishas Formerly exhibition. That was our first show in this space. And on the right, you may recognize a couple of the very first visitors to our new seaweed exhibition. The Submarine Revitalization Project took place in January of 2022. This project fully revitalized our signature welcome experience. The work included bringing back elements previously taken offline, as well as full equipment updates, creative enhancements, and the installation of a new content delivery system. So this project now, this space now, like the back gallery, can change. So this will give the center creative flexibility for years to come. It's very exciting.
Okay, so we're going to switch gears now and take a look at the current year, which began on June 1st. So with ongoing recovery and improvement in mind, the current plan is for a break-even budget before capital investment. The schedule for the capital work is staged and will proceed only if revenue is on track. Our planning processes continue to improve, and this year we had more engagement from senior staff into the planning and budgeting work. The performance metrics and strategic plan are used to guide a number of our overarching goals framing the plan.
Awesome. And the full plan, as you probably already know, it's included in your package in Appendix 2.
Right.
All right.
And year to date, we are effectively on plan, so.
And that package is Appendix 3. All right, so now on to just a few activity highlights behind those numbers for the last 5 months, so, or for the first 5 months of the fiscal year that we're in now. So we opened our first full-scale internally created exhibition, Seaweed Mysteries of the Amber Forest. So this photo was at our official kelp cutting on October 15th. I don't think we've had a kelp cutting since the center opened at the very beginning. So the planning, the installation, and opening of this full-sized feature exhibition in our newly renovated feature gallery space was a really big step for our team. As well, I'm going to just highlight that our early efforts to live into this 10-year strategic plan, it's a big plan with big ideas. Those efforts, initial efforts, are focused on how we do what we do rather than adding costly initiatives. So we've got 8 new values that are articulated in our plan, and in the first 5 months of the year, we've taken steps towards living into those newly articulated values. And this picture shows on the left side a really fun thing to do, give things away. You don't get to do that all the time. So $2,000 was raised at our second annual Ascarium, our Halloween event for families, and those proceeds were split between our charity and the Beacon Family Services. And on the left there is the head of animal care for our center, who's also with us today, Kit Thornton, with our new board chair, Alan Lane. They're presenting a check for $1,000 to Courtney Norbury with the Beacon Family Services. And those funds will support their family programs, and center passes will also be given to those families in the hampers for the holiday season. And on the right, I'm particularly excited about this activity. You'll see 2 of our staff members delivering hands-on outreach for children at a local daycare, and this is part of our new employee volunteer program. So every volunteer, or every staff member at the center annually gets half of their average weekly hours to volunteer in the community. So I work 5 days a week, so I get 2.5 paid days to do something aligned with our strategic plan that benefits our community. So that's an exciting step for us as well. And that concludes our update.
Thank you very much, ladies, for the excellent presentation. I remember that picture too. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor Antilla.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Janine and Pauline, for the presentation. Always good to see you, and great to see the turnaround, particularly organizationally, that the center's experienced, I think, under your leadership, Pauline, and with the help of a very dedicated volunteer board of directors. I just wondered if you could comment a little further on planned capital expenditures around life support systems, so marine life support systems. It looks like you did a fair bit of work in the current financial cycle, and lots more to come, but it seems to me you maybe had someone on your board who had some expertise in that area that was helping, or a dedicated staff member in that area, and just wanted to ask about sort of retention in that area and how you foresee that moving forward.
Yeah, it's still a good question. It's a full-time team member, engineer we hired shortly after I arrived, and he has definitely led those improvements in a big way. He's worked very closely with our Aquaris team, so Kit's team as well. So one of the things that we have done is brought the aquarist, or the animal care folks, into a lot of the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance. So in terms of daily, sort of weekly stuff, there is redundancy, but when it comes to those really big rejuvenation and transformational like projects in the back end, I don't have another person with that person's brain. We can contract some of that out, but for the moment we are hoping and working to keep this individual, to keep things fresh. It's unusual to get someone with that particular mix of skill sets, but people do. He existed, so someone else could exist as well. But for the moment, we've got him, and we're working to kind of build a little bit of redundancy, at least in the more regular work.
Super. Thanks for that. Yeah, that's good news that the retention has been there and been successful given the nature of that work. So well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Antilla, Councillor Duck, then Councillor Garnett.
Thank you for our presentation. I truly want to commend you on the new exhibit space, because I think that really does a great job in keeping the center fresh. And certainly the exhibits you've had in there so far this year have been exactly that, and engaging and drawing people in. So I think it's a way in which it's brought some life back to the center, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Liaison to this lovely group as well, and it's funny you should bring up the question about that, because Hugo, the gentleman, at a board meeting basically said that he has no plans to go anywhere. and they were pretty gleeful when that statement came out, because he does provide a lot to the facility. A job well done again this past year. The space is fantastic. The gallery space, having been to both exhibits, to Fishes formerly, I think was a really important exhibit to open with. It was educational. It was thought-provoking, and I hope as many people as possible were able to see it in the community. And the one you have now is just. It's breathtaking, really, the art and the way. And if you get there on the right day when sun's coming through in the morning, you'll get a pretty special picture of what they've got on their windows. And I advise people to take advantage of that. And the working with staff in terms of the Capital Reserve Fund, and the fact that you plan to not, you're going to monitor your income levels to make sure you're not overstretching yourself, is really important. And I think back to where you were when we first got on council in 2018, and just the changes that have been made in terms of how you're managing the facility, and how important that Capital Reserve Fund is, and how you sought to make sure with our senior staff to make sure that was a priority. And good on you for doing it. That's going to make all the difference in the world. Congratulations, and thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Councillor Nuppick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You guys have one of the greatest attractions in the town of Sidney. I know I always send my visitors there, and nobody's ever come away with anything less than wonderful stories about how they enjoyed it. Thank you for your presentation. I've got two questions for you. First one is, I looked at your revenue plan, and I don't see anything from North Saanich. Is that something that's on your radar? Are you looking at the possibility of asking them to help fund this? Because, well, North Saanich certainly has a heck of a lot more shoreline than town of Sidney does. And I would think that you probably get as many visitors from North Saanich as you do from the town of Sidney, not including, of course, the visitors to the region. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
No, it's a great question, and we haven't started to figure out how we might do that, but it's definitely something that we would like to do. So we might learn from our colleague at the museum.
Yes.
Lots of sharing
Okay.
back and forth between us, but it's a great idea, and I couldn't agree more. They're definitely benefiting from.
Good. My second question is, I read your report. There's one area that didn't seem to get a lot of attention, yet I know it's a very popular aspect of your operation, and that is the rental of your space for special events. I know personally, I've been to the Shaw Centre for quite a few events over the time I've been in Sidney, and I think it's one of the premier venues in the region. And so I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how that is working for you, and if you have any plans to sort of take it to the next level.
Yeah, great question. Timing-wise, it's a extra great question, because we've had one of our best 30, 40 days on record. So we were very cautious with facility rentals during the pandemic. We've been a little bit slow to bring facilitated programs back online, things that gather. We're still not doing our octopus feeding gatherings. We're getting there. We've got a plan now, but we're very careful and gradual with that. Facility rentals, we've just brought them back this fall, and November and December have been awesome, to the point where I'm renegotiating with our cleaners, because there's so many in the evenings, and which is a great problem to have. With the staff we've remembered how to clean, because we did clean during COVID, so we've done a few cleanings. Kit can attest to that. So agree that it has lots of potential. We also have some other infrastructure challenges with our projectors, and we're prioritizing and moving some priorities around there, because that is absolutely expected from a facility rental client. So another great source of revenue that we definitely have not yet taken to the next level, but we do have a great contractor that we work with, Terra Keeping, who is bringing us into the, maybe not quite the next level yet, but we're on our way up the elevator.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Great to see the centre sort of coming out very well in the after COVID. Just a comment from me. I really liked your comments and your focus on your values, and about how you're sort of focusing on conveying those and looking at how you're doing things, and providing staff with time to go and volunteer. I think that's great. I think it's especially great in a time like this, where businesses, organizations are struggling to find people. So I think those sorts of things are great. And I'm wondering, I guess a question might be is if you might share any particular best practices you have in terms of things you're doing to retain those 124 volunteers, because that's volunteer fatigue is getting to be a thing with all sorts of community organizations, and any tips or tricks you might share with the community in regards to how you're able to do that.
It's a great question. I'm going to take a first stab at it, but it's something I would like to respond to more fully after I talk with Pat Taylor, as our volunteer coordinator now, and she's 1 year, actually, almost not quite to the day, in that role, and she knows the community very well. In the past year, it's been a little bit of bringing back the things that we stopped doing. We weren't gathering. We didn't bring volunteers together. We're doing it a bit differently, because we're doing it more drop-in. but making sure you thank them, of course, and bringing folks together with not just a party, but also with Pro-D opportunities. The folks that choose to volunteer with us really want to learn. They're really passionate. And one of the things that I think is incredible about the volunteer program at the center, and I had nothing to do with it, but I talk about it all the time, is when you volunteer at the center, at the beginning of every shift, you have a 15-minute enrichment. So it's kind of like a TED Talk. I mean, it's not quite a TED Talk, but it's that right nugget. It's that right amount of information where you're getting something exciting and new every time you come in. And I love that. And I haven't worked anywhere, and I've worked in a lot of places that have volunteers as docents, and I've never seen anyone that's done it quite like that. And I think that's a big one. But I will also say we're learning a lot. So I know Pat has done a number of training sessions, and she's engaged with Volunteer Victoria, specifically trying to figure out how do we get more younger volunteers to stay longer than a few months. And I don't have a silver bullet, but we're engaging with other community groups to try to get better at all of that.
Yeah, great, good.
I also think we have a couple different avenues that volunteers can go.
You might just want to come forward just for the mic. We're just, thank you.
So we have a couple different avenues that volunteers can go to, so they can, after they do 40 hours, they have an opportunity to volunteer with the animal care team, which a lot of them really like because you get to feed fish, which is pretty cool. And then there's also the events that they can sign up to, and a lot of our regulars really like joining in at the events and like the weddings that we have, the Halloween ones, for example. So I think the variety helps keep them engaged. And also I think they have a large sense of ownership over the center as well. You know, seeing the animals and the staff, it's kind of like, you know, having little friend hangouts every week when they come to visit. And lastly, sometimes we let them play with the octopus, so that helps too.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. So thank you to the ladies for your presentation, and thank you to your volunteers. I'm always inspired when attending with visitors the center, because the volunteers, there's a unique aspect to the volunteers at the aquarium, and that is the youth volunteers. There's not a lot of places you go and there's youth volunteers, and it brings an extra dimension, I think, in our community when you see volunteers of all ages working together. So congratulations, Pauline, to you and your dedicated staff, and to Janine, to your contributions to the board and the board of directors. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Councillor Duck.
I just want to comment both to the museum and the Shaw Centre. We're very fortunate in the town of Sidney to have the quality of staff that you present and the caliber of volunteers you bring both to your boards and to the volunteers that work both those institutions. They are premier attractions in the town of Sidney, and we can't be more thankful for the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. And we'll now turn to our third presentation, and our presenter is joining us online this evening. I'll say good evening to Kathleen Gilbert, who is the film commissioner for the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission. Good evening, Ms. Gilbert. The floor is yours for up to 10 minutes, and we'd be pleased if you took any questions from colleagues when you're finished.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Let me just get me going here. There we go. So yes, good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. I'm Kathleen Gilbert. I'm the Film Commissioner for Vancouver Island South. I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time this evening to update you on the industry in the region, and a little bit about the Film Commission for those of you that might not be aware of what we do. So we are the first and longest running film commission in BC, and we are now the busiest BC region outside of the Lower Mainland. The Film Commission works very hard to bring jobs and economic development to the CRD by promoting the region worldwide to producers. We recently, as many of you know, landed the multi-award-winning television series Made, and this series filmed in almost every municipality in the CRD, including Sidney. Our region now appears on the Netflix International In Your Neighborhood map, with links to many businesses and tourist sites throughout our region. Last year, we landed 40 shows and we created over 2,000 well-paying jobs with almost 60 million in direct spend. And that money flows throughout the region. Film crews live and spend their paychecks throughout the region, and businesses that profit from the industry are also located throughout the CRD. But it takes a lot of effort to land these shows, and we do everything that we can to land them, and then we do everything we can to keep them coming back, to keep them happy while they're filming here so they return. We provide continuous consulting and production services from the beginning of their project to the end. For example, we worked with Grace Point, which did a lot of filming in Sidney, for over a year to bring that series here. MADE took 17 location packages containing hundreds of locations and months of hard work to land. We provide script breakdowns, location scouting, and location packages. And a location package like the 17 we sent to MADE takes several staff many hours to put together and often contain hundreds of locations. We maintain a crew and a local business database, and we make recommendations for both of those. And this database requires constant, time-consuming updating by our staff. We work 24/7 fielding calls from both productions and the general public. We help cut through red tape, and we act as a complaints department and a mediator when things go wrong. But we don't just work for the big LA producers. We help our local filmmakers tell local stories. We also host networking and education events, and we work with local schools to encourage youth to consider a career in film. And we also put heads in beds. Sorry, that's... So this is our direct spend. I'll get back to heads in beds. Sorry, my slides are a little bit mixed up here. So as you can see from this chart, we were very successful at growing the industry. However, with the proper funding and enough staff, we believe that we could produce extraordinary economic growth for our region. Here we go. We put heads in beds. In 2020, Bill Lewis, the chair of the Hotel Association of Greater Victoria, stated that the film industry was a lifeline for some of the downtown hotels during COVID. These stats give you an idea of what's possible and how this industry can augment tourism during the downtimes and the shoulder seasons. When our industry supports these hotels, we are in fact supporting the thousands of local residents who work in them as well. And I could do a slide like this for so many other businesses, like the car rental business, building supply industry, local clothing stores, coffee shops, restaurants, office supply stores, furniture stores, and the list goes on and on. And there's a career for everyone in the film industry. These are high-paying, sustainable jobs. Many jobs outside of the film industry have transferable skills that allows workers to transition easily into the film industry. Many of the departments in our industry offer on-the-job training for people with little or no experience in that field. And we're currently working with Camosun College to develop union-approved micro-credential courses that will help youth fast-track into this industry. Film is a great career, and it offers wages that allows workers to buy homes and raise their families right here in Victoria. And as we grow this industry, the need for workers also grows, and that's why we regularly provide information, education, and one-on-one career counseling for prospective film workers. As I mentioned, these are high-paying, sustainable union jobs that we're creating. The starting wage as an entry-level production assistant, and that's the people that direct the traffic and sweep the cigarette butts and keep the streets clean, is over $300 a day. And the yearly salary for a department head can be well over $130,000 a year. The wages for creatives like directors, cinematographers, production designers, and writers is really unlimited. And we're working really hard to green our industry. BC was one of the first in the world to create a real green initiative, and we've been working for over 12 years to mainstream sustainable practices across our industry. From reusing costumes building materials, to working with municipalities to offer electrical grid hookups, to educating crew on using sustainable production practices. We're working hard to reach a goal of 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And our focus in 2023 is to grow and diversify our crew base. We want to show young people that there's a place for them in this industry, and we especially want to reach out to youth at risk. This industry does not require a post-secondary degree or even a high school education, so it's a good fit for those young people struggling within our educational system. We also hope to introduce our film-friendly community initiative that was stalled due to COVID, and that's where we hope to recognize businesses that want to do business with the film industry and that are film friendly. The City of Victoria has included growing the film industry in their strategic plan, recognizing that there are opportunities for improvement in the city to grow the industry. And all that I would ask of you is that when it comes time to doing budget deliberations, that you consider granting us our full grant this year. Thank you, and that's all I have for you, unless you have some questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert, for the presentation. I'll turn to colleagues and begin with Councillor Duck.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Gilbert. And I noticed that you had a bullet there that you didn't mention, which was working towards getting a film studio here. It's been about a decade since I think a group of us went over to tour the studios in Vancouver. And I'm curious to see if we're progressing closer to that, given the growth in the market here and the employment force at studio seems hopefully imminent. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. Well, we have a few of them that are on paper right now. Unfortunately, no shovels in the ground. But of course, Camosun College is moving ahead with their plans to build a film studio on their interurban campus. We have another project that's possibly going to happen in Langford, although that one has been stalled somewhat. And we actually have a couple that I can't talk about that are out on the peninsula. So I'm really hoping that by the end of next year, we might see bigger productions coming to town. And the importance of a film studio can't be understated, because right now the budgets that we're able to land, because we don't have a studio, tend to range between 3 million and 10 million. And with a studio, we could be going after the really big shows that bring $200 million into our local economy. So we really need to get that studio.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to talk a bit about, so Town of Sidney we're embarking on an economic development strategy. And in the draft that we received, there's actually no mention of the impact of the film industry on our economy. We don't have any data on that. I'm wondering, is that something that you keep track of in terms of, the number of productions that took place here, the number of days of filming, the impact that it had on our local economy?
Yeah, we try to do that as much as possible. It's often very difficult to get that information from producers once they've left, so we do try to get it, and then it's almost impossible while they're here. They're so busy, and they don't have those numbers until after they're done. So we do work to try to get those numbers. Creative BC has, for the first time this year, actually put some money towards trying to get regional stats to us, and we're hoping to get those anytime. Now, they won't break down municipalities, they just break it down in terms of the great CRD versus Island North and the Okanagan. So, and the only way that we can really get numbers of days would be from your film permitting offices. So I don't know whether you keep track of those days or not. We would certainly, we have asked most of our film liaisons to share that with us. I could reach out to Sidney and see if they could share that with us for sure. That would help us with our stats at the end of the year. We do try to ask for the locations from the production office, but oftentimes they state confidentiality. So it's a challenge getting stats for sure.
Okay, well, thanks for that. I guess Just a
But
comment.
we do know what the economic impact, we do know how much money they spend locally. We just can't, it's really difficult to break it down municipality-wise.
Right,
Lack of
okay.
a better word.
I guess my request would be, or suggestion, if, as things move along, if you're in a position where you're able to do that, it's good because it makes us easier when we're looking at budgets and we have a lot of people coming to us with their hand out. If there's a way that we can justify, the impact that it's having to our local businesses and our economy, just makes it a lot easier. And just one other question in terms of, you mentioned the film-friendly communities campaign, and it's sort of related to, I think, maybe a question I had in terms of, do you get any feedback from the productions about preferred places in terms of where it's easy or not so easy? Are there things that we could be doing to make it more attractive for more productions to come here? Or is it just that Sidney is always going to be a good location because it looks like, an American seaside town, and it's got a nice walkway where, romantic things can take place for Hallmark movies? So,
Councillor Keith, if you have a script, you should.
yeah.
But
please
thank you, that's a
continue.
great question, and we just, I think Sidney is doing a really good job once we're able to get the film there. We send Sidney in almost every single package that we do in every single package. For every single script that requires a small town look, we include Sidney. And of course you have some other locations there that we send out on a regular basis as well. So yeah, it's just when they're there being just as helpful as you can be. We do have municipalities that don't charge any fees. I don't know that that's a good idea. I think really it should be cost recovery at the very least, and there actually is an opportunity for the town to make a little bit of money on that. I think productions expect that they're going to have to pay for parking, and they expect that they're going to have to pay for permitting. So they're not going to come because you give that away free. So just being open and helping them, especially around parking and when they want to shoot late at night, all of those things is a great help.
So in that film-friendly communities campaign, is that something that will be going out to all municipalities so that we can then look at that and see, okay, are there other things that we could be doing, administratively or process-wise to make it easier? Is that the intention, I guess?
Yeah, I would love to give that some thought and send you some ideas around that. And we haven't decided where we're going to start. We initially thought we would start in Victoria, but maybe it'd be better to start in a smaller downtown area. And really what it is, it's a sticker that you get for the front of your window that says, we're film friendly. We love film too, is what it says. And what it identifies, we tell productions what we started to tell productions was when you see that sticker, that business is film friendly. So that that they're interested in being a location and they know that they support the film industry. So please give your business to them, as well as then you can use them perhaps in your movie. So that's the whole idea of the film friendly, we love film too campaign.
Right, good. Okay.
And I would love to start it in Sidney.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Kathleen, very much. If you're wondering why you're still at work at 7:15 a week before Christmas and thinking, holy cow, what am I doing? This was really worth it because I learned a lot, and I'm sure some of my colleagues did as well. It's very exciting, and myself, I would have thought, who doesn't want to come and film Vancouver Island? It's beautiful. How hard can this job be to sell Vancouver Island? But there's a lot of work that you're doing, and thank you for highlighting it. The partnerships at Camosun with the work you're doing with youth are very important in terms of developing lifelong skills in well-paying jobs. So thank you for that. I'm just curious, what's with the full budget as you've requested for the year ahead? What's your number one priority for Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission? What's the big goal? What's standing in your way to further success right now that your budget's going to help fulfill?
Well, our big goal is to get back down to marketing in LA actually, because we haven't gone down for a couple of years because of COVID, and I just feel that might be starting to show. So we need to get back down there. But really, in terms of our goals for next year, we've really prioritized building our local crew base, because when productions come over and they have to bring people over, it costs them a lot of money. So it really does deter people from coming here if we have one show and they can't, there's already a show here, they don't want to come because, they've used up our crews. So we really want to focus on that. And we do want people, that's why we're focusing on youth, is because we want people to think of it as a lifelong career, because we want to build this industry into the future, not just looking at the next couple of years. And of course, the film studio is always going to be top on my to-do list every year, and it has been for the last 10 years, as someone mentioned. So yeah, those are really our priorities for next year.
Super, thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Just one question, Ms. Gilbert, and that is you put up a very positive slide, the increase in direct spending from 210 to 221, and I just note that the years 2020 and 2021 were triple the years 218 and 219. Is there something, I know it's coincidental with the pandemic, but is there something that contributed to that, something specific that contributed to that?
I mean, we really do say that we really believe that it was COVID. While everybody else was suffering, unfortunately, we did very, very well during COVID. And it was because, and especially here on the island, because producers in LA were looking for safe places to come and do movies during that time. And really, we just dealt with COVID so well here that really attracted them here. That was certainly one of the #1 reasons. And they didn't want to travel very far because of COVID either, and because we're so close to LA. So it was all about COVID at this point. Now, I should say too that we have more and more streaming services out there. So there's more need for product and content than there ever has been as well. But those 2 years were quite good. This year we had some labor unrest, so we don't know that we're going to be bringing in that kind of money, but it's going to still be very substantial. We're probably looking at least 50 million in direct spend.
Well, thank you. And I guess the silver lining is that it's exposed a whole new group to our region, and presents opportunity for future investment. Seeing no further questions from colleagues, thank you again, Kathleen and Gilbert. We really appreciate coming forward this evening, and have a good evening.
Yeah, and please reach out if anybody wants to visit a set, especially when they're in Sydney. Just reach out to me. I'm happy to make those arrangements to have you visit a set, the next set that's in Sydney.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Take care. Good night.
So we're about an hour and 20 minutes into our meeting, and I'm just going to call a 5-minute recess. And we do have a number of items for our agenda this evening, and we're trying to take recesses at about the hour-and-a-half mark. So I'll do that now. Thank you.
your little quote in, like, to what sort of number of kilometers of wind? Like when they say gusting to 40 or to 50 or 60, is that like, what can you handle? Oh, was it? Oh.
Okay, thank you. We'll reconvene now. And we'll continue on our agenda. We're at number 5, bylaws, and the first is our Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw number 2246. This is amendment number 1 to include fees for enforcement of the single-use plastic bylaw. This is the first time coming to council, and I'll turn to Ms. Clary for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this bylaw amendment is just to add fees to the Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw. The Single-Use Plastics Bylaw, which comes into force on January 1st, 2023, is already enforceable through the recently adopted Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw. However, the Municipal Ticket Information is the town's, the ticketing system we're more familiar with, so we do want to add it to that bylaw. The fee schedule is the same as the one that was already adopted. And I'm here if you have any other questions.
Thank you. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Through you to staff, so I understand the federal government is coming forward with a ban on plastic. So how does that, is that coming also in 2023? And would this be sort of not in effect, or would this be in addition to what the federal bylaw would be proposing?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, so the single-use plastics bylaw is already adopted by council. However, we just didn't have a fining mechanism in the MTI bylaw for that. So it is addition to the federal government's ban that they are putting on. I understand that the federal government is allowing businesses a full year to use up their single-use plastics, so 2023 would be that year. So this bylaw would prevent businesses in Sidney from using single-use plastics during that time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Any further questions? So we can move forward this evening with three motions to give readings. Councillor Rintoul.
I'll move first reading of bylaw number 2246, Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw Amendment number 1.
Second.
We have moved and seconded. All in favor? None are opposed. Motion carries.
Second reading.
Second.
Second reading is when we have any discussion. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None are opposed. Motion carries unanimous. And third reading?
I'll move third reading.
Second.
All in favor? And motion carries. And this will come forward for consideration of adoption at our next council meeting in January. We'll next turn to development permits and development variance permits. And the first is 6A, which is development variance permit application number DV 100326 at 103-2360 Beacon Avenue, 900 Degrees Pizzeria, to allow a roof sign to be added to the building. We have discussed this at previous meetings. Notice was sent out to neighbors or to area businesses, and we've received no written submissions as of today. And we do have a recommendation.
I'll move that the variance be approved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? None are opposed. The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And we'll go to item 6B, which is the development variance permit application number DV 100328 at 2241 Markinch Place to reduce the minimum setback for a heat pump. And so we have received the one written submission that was on the agenda this evening, and we do have a recommendation. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you. I'll move that the variance be approved.
I'll second.
Moved by Councillor Rintoul, seconded by Councillor Novick. Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've seen some of these. We've had considerable discussion on this. I appreciate the feedback from Mr. Maddison. I think ultimately, the town staff have advised council that, they're looking to amend some of our bylaw requirements around heat pumps, and I think that's something that is likely to come forward fairly expeditiously. In the meantime, I think we continue to encourage residents to place heat pumps on their properties, and we'll hope more so that developers are doing this on the front end of their projects as opposed to the back end, as is the case here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Novick?
Nothing further to add.
Thank you. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thought I have with this is that we had a similar request come before the past council in the summer, I believe in a townhouse complex between Resthaven and 7th, where when we accepted the variance, but we included a noise attenuation. And I'm wondering if that's something we need to be looking at as we move forward, because we're getting more and more of these. So I'm just a little concerned that we required it of one proposal, but we're not going to require it of others, and how that might impact neighbors. I'm wondering what other councillors might have thoughts on that.
Sure. I'll take that, Councillor Garnett, through to staff, and we appreciate this might be putting staff on the spot, but through that variance request that came forward on Resthaven, I'm sorry, I just don't recall what the particular recommendation might have been with regards to sound attenuation.
I'll defer to Ms. Verhagen if she's able to respond.
Oh, good evening, Ms. Verhagen.
Good evening. Through the mayor to councillor. That variance was for the townhouse development. I believe it was a 14-unit townhouse development that spans between 7th and Resthaven. I can't recall the exact address right now. The variance was approved subject to the condition that sound attenuation be installed around each heat pump to be installed. My understanding of the rationale around that was the number of heat pumps involved there, because there was 14 units. There could be up to 7 heat pumps on the north side and 7 on the south side. In this case, this is one dwelling unit, so it would be up to council whether to add that condition in this case or not.
Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. Councillor Garnett, you have the floor.
I'm just open to hear other councillors or members' thoughts on what they think about it.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I was also thinking about the sound attenuation. I'll propose an amendment if that's the appropriate thing to do, that the variance be provided, provided that they provide sound attenuation around the heat pump.
Okay, so I get the intention that the variance is being approved subject to the installation of sound attenuation.
Yes.
If I could turn to staff for just a moment, given that we have passed this at a previous motion, staff monitors this in terms of the subject to after installation?
We wouldn't, sorry, through to the mayor, we would not be monitoring it on an ongoing basis, no. In this case, this dwelling at 2241 was issued conditional occupancy, depending on the outcome of this variance application, because the heat pump is already there. In order for us, like if council put this as a condition, then we would look for the sound attenuation to be added to the heat pump before final was given. We don't continue to monitor after that.
No, thank you, that's helpful. So Councillor O'Keefe has moved the amendment. Do we have a seconder?
Second for discussion.
Okay, Councillor O'Keefe, to motivate further?
Yep, sure. I think what's of note to me here is I recognize that in the properties on Resthaven, there was a number of units, townhouses in close proximity. This particular subdivision is also very, houses in close quarters. Not a lot of, it's intensive zoning, I think, in that area. And I found the letter from Mr. Maddison enlightening in terms of, that it is already creating problems in that neighborhood and for him because of heat pumps that were not installed according to the current setbacks. So I think we seem to be getting a lot of these things now. I agree that heat pumps are a good thing. I recognize that staff are going to be coming forward with additional requirements to guide us on this. So I think in the meantime, if we can at least say yes to these things, but they provide sound attenuation, is a reasonable thing to do at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Duck as the seconder.
I'm thinking this is a case where the horse is already out of the barn, and we've approved a number of variances for heat pumps without sound attenuation. I think the newer heat pumps provide good sound limited sound emissions that they be used, and I'm concerned that until we take this to zoning bylaw and look at setbacks relative to heat pumps, that we've already had a number in the last few months of variances relative to heat pumps without sound attenuation, and now we're looking at some cases where we're going to add them in and some we're not going to. I have concerns about picking and choosing which ones we add sound attenuation to when the setbacks are relatively the same.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul and to Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think some of this is up to sort of good neighborly policies as well. And if we recognize that sound attenuation is important to one of your neighbors, I think it's incumbent, frankly, on you as a good neighbor to try and make whatever arrangements you can to help facilitate the comfort factor for your neighbors as well as yourselves. Having said that, I'm curious something with respect to Ms. Verhagen mentioned, and that is the conditional nature of the occupancy permit. Would a subject to, such as been put forward, jeopardize at all the nature of the occupancy permit or delay that process in any manner that may be challenging for the applicants? So that's a question to the staff, please.
Certainly. I do
Good
have
evening. Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, I'd have to look into that and speak with our senior building officials. So that would be something we can provide a response on in the new year.
Okay, so thank you. And I think because of that and the uncertainty with respect to the unique nature of this, I'm inclined to not support the amendment that's been put forward. Although in principle, I certainly do think, again, it's a good neighborly policy to try and make sure your heat pump is as quiet as possible. And further to Councillor Duck's points, I concur it's difficult for this body to arbitrarily pick and choose which heat pumps we should be adding this subject to. So certainly some concern with the amendment as it's suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. Councillor Duncan, I do have you after Councillor Novak. Please go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Duck and Councillor Rintoul. My concern is that sound attenuation is a rather vague construct. Unless our staff are prepared to study this and come up with sound attenuation numbers, for example, the number of decibels of sound that are permissible, within a certain distance from the heat pump, it becomes extremely difficult to manage this, especially since different manufacturers of heat pumps will have different sound levels, and different sizes of heat pumps will have different sound levels. So simply saying sound attenuation is not the right approach to this. And so for that reason, I'm inclined not to support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Novak. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. Councillor Novak just really said the last of what I would have said that Councillor Rintoul and Councillor Duck already said. I know from walking through there are at least 3 heat pumps in this development already that never got caught when they built their houses and are certainly unconforming, as our letter writer, Mr. Maddison, indicates. And so I feel having the one homeowner that got caught, and who's already kind of been put through some inconvenience here, as Councillor Rintoul has pointed out, that gives me pause. Knowing that other people have already put these in, and knowing that some of them are even problematic and there would be no attenuation for those ones that we know for sure seem to be problematic. I want to make sure that we're not being unfair to these new applicants. However, I appreciate the idea that Mr. Maddison has written to us, and that we will be looking at the idea of sound attenuation, and hopefully staff can speak to what data there might be about different methods of sound attenuation that could be used when they come forward with their edits to our bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Seeing no further discussion, Councillor Garnett,
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
on the amendment?
I just think it was important to raise the idea of for Mr. Maddison, just to have the discussion and let them be aware of what we're thinking. And I think there's some really excellent points been raised by members here, so I'm appreciative of the discussion, and that will help my decision. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion on the amendment, I'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is defeated. Thank you for that discussion. We're back to the main motion. Is there any further discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? None are opposed. That motion carries. Thank you. We'll next turn to 7, which is adoption of minutes, and we have the minutes from our regular council meeting of December 5th.
I'll move adoption.
Second.
We have moved and seconded. Any errors, omissions, or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None are opposed. The motion carries. We have no business not completed at a previous meeting. We're now turning to number 9, which is rise and report from in-camera minutes. This is for information only. At the council in-camera meeting on December 5th, council passed the following resolution with regards to the Economic Advisory Committee, and that it is that Morgan Shaw, representing the Sidney Business Improvement Area, and Carrie Salvador, representing the Sidney Event Advisory Group, be appointed to the Economic Advisory Committee for a 1-year term ending December 2023. So that was for information. I'll move next to Mayor's report. I just have a couple of things this evening, and I meant to actually mention one of them while the Sidney Museum and Archives was here. But I wanted to extend thanks to both the Sidney Museum and Archives and to the Aviation Museum in North Saanich for inviting both Sidney Council and North Saanich Council to a joint reception, tour, and Q&A, and some goodies. We spent an evening. I was pleased that several colleagues were able to join me, and we enjoyed separate evenings at the 2 museums. I think it was excellent to do that together with our colleagues in North Saanich. We both support these museums, and you know, there's both of these museums are real treasures in our community. They attract visitors from far beyond our immediate location, and similar to the presentations we heard from tonight, we know the value and importance of the volunteer board members and the volunteers that work in those organizations. So I just want to acknowledge that they reached out to Sidney and North Saanich Council to provide those opportunities. And second is just a warm message for the season, as this is our last council meeting of 2022. I want to say to council colleagues, to town staff, and to members of the public in attendance that I wish you and your loved ones a happy holiday season, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I hope you have a wonderful time and enjoy this special time of year. Thank you. We'll next turn to council reports. We have 2 this evening. The first is 11A, and Councillor O'Toole as our council liaison to the Memorial Park Society. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to provide council with an update with respect to the Mary Winspear Centre and my role as council liaison. And at that meeting, and I thank Councillor Garnett for attending as well, I reminded the Mary Winspear Centre and the Memorial Park Society's Board of Directors the role of a council liaison, because there's certainly in the community, I think, some understanding that the role of a liaison may be a little more different than our policy stipulates. So I wanted to ensure that the board themselves understand that as a liaison from the town, that we're responsible to provide two-way communications. We're that point of contact routinely between the town and the board or the executive director, along with town staff in a more formal role, but also to identify and help resolve problems that may exist. And so I look forward to working in that liaison capacity on behalf of the town to help facilitate further discussions between the town and the Mary Winspear Centre as we move forward. Important to note, as has been reported in the media, that the Mary Winspear Centre Memorial Park Society lost their charitable status with CRA, and they have been going through a process there to catch up on their financial audits from the period of 2019, 2020, and 2021. We were informed at that meeting that 4 of those 6 audits were completed, and that when they're complete, they will be providing ongoing updates to town staff with respect to their progress and their findings as a result of those audits. So I was certainly reassured that those audits are well underway, and that the board is pursuing their fiduciary responsibilities in those areas. They have a relatively new executive director in the person of Denny Warner, who's settled into her role in very challenging circumstances. And I think Denny is well known in the community as someone who will be quite dedicated to her role and helping to resolve this. And also would note my satisfaction that the board has looked to add to its depth by adding another director to their board's composition. DELEGATIONS, who's a lawyer locally, will be on the Memorial Park Society Board of Directors, and I think he will offer a fair amount of insight, particularly with respect to the challenges of having their charitable status situation resolved and renewed with the CRA. So it certainly felt positive. Their year-to-date income statement that certainly looks as though they may be in a loss position at the end of the year remains to be seen. I recollect November and December tend to be their strongest months financially, so they may very well turn a corner. But they've also have assets in investment that exceed what any financial position may end up looking like at the end of the year. So I felt comfortable with their position and the work they're doing right now to try and overcome the challenges that they found themselves in. I do have a motion arising from that report, but I'll pause if you would like, Mr. Mayor, or I can move forward with that motion arising.
I'll turn to colleagues if they have any questions, and then I'll look for a motion to receive the verbal report. Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Novick.
Thank you. So it's good that 4 out of the 6 audits are complete. Can we anticipate that members of the board will come before council to once that's done, and give us an overview of what happened there, what measures they've put in place to make sure this doesn't happen again? I think there's concern in the community that how could a board of directors sort of not see that financial statements and things. So I think there's a great level of interest, myself as a council member, and I think in the community in terms of a bit of a debrief on what happened there and what measures are being put in place to ensure this doesn't happen again.
So if I may, through the chair, comment on that, and yeah, thank you. My motion arising will actually try to address that question and formalize a process annually in which the town receives reporting from the Memorial Park Society going forward, which of course would include the type of insight that you've just sought, Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, and if I might add that when the town was made aware of this, we were also made aware that the Memorial Park Society, upon completion of this review and status on regaining charitable status, that they would be not only letting their membership know, but they would be issuing press releases so the general public would know, and I expect we would receive something at council. Councillor O'Keefe?
So that's good that they're going to send a press release. I guess my question is, are they going to come before council so we have an opportunity to ask questions? I think as significant contributors to the Memorial Park Society, I feel that they should have an obligation to come before council to say, here's what happened, speak to us directly as a major contributor. Here's what happened. Here's the measures we're taking in the future.
Yeah, Councillor O'Keefe, I haven't said they won't come. I've
Okay.
said that our understanding is that they would complete the process and that they would come forward publicly. And I would expect, given the long-term relationship with the Memorial Park Society, that that council would certainly be made aware. So
Okay, I'm just wondering, do we need to make a motion to ask them to come?
I think-
or are you anticipating that they will come voluntarily?
what I'm suggesting is I'm suggesting that we await the completion of the process and how they come forward. If we have concerns at that time that they haven't reported out reasonably or to council reasonably, then we can certainly go further at that time.
Okay, we'll leave it at that for now, thank you.
If I may, Chair, again, I think my motion arising in part will address that, but also I can assure you that I strongly suggested, and again, in my role as a council liaison, that's all I can do, is to the board to ensure that they're looking to come forward annually to the town to provide us updates in general, not just on this issue, but in general, the same way we saw this evening from 3 nonprofits that we support. Those are great presentations, and I think they were really pleased at the opportunity to be able to regroup themselves and yes, come forward and do that. Having said that, it's nothing that's been scheduled to the best of my knowledge, and they still have a process to complete.
Any further questions on the main report? I'll turn to Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through yourself to Councillor Rintoul. Councillor, you began your report saying that there was or appeared to be some misunderstanding as to the role of liaison. And I wonder if you could expand on that, because I'm a little curious as to, A, where that came from, and if there are perhaps parallels with some of our other roles within council.
Sure. Through the mayor, if there is any uncertainty in the case of the Memorial Park Society, I think it's simply that their bylaws refer to municipal council liaisons as directors of the Memorial Park Society. In reality, liaisons are appointed as liaisons. They are not directors. And so I did raise that, what I would consider a housekeeping matter, with the Memorial Park Society, so that when they're reviewing their bylaws, they can take a look at that and come back to the town, I think, and say, no, we would like to see you as a voting member, as a full director, option 1, because we do have assignments to boards. For example, the Peninsula Recreation Commission comes to mind, or Crest comes to mind, where members of council are full voting members of the board.
Trustees.
And if that's the case, then the town can revisit how they appoint members. But currently, I just wanted to stipulate that as a liaison, the role is very much to be eyes and ears and to be that intermediary. And I wanted to ensure that they have the opportunity while they're doing this review to be cognizant of that difference that exists right now.
So are you, through the mayor to yourself, so are you suggesting that they should come to council and ask us to make that appointment to their board rather than simply a liaison? Do you think that might change the relationship?
Councillor Novick, I don't mean to interject, and I will certainly...
We're getting too far off.
No, you're not getting far off at all. It's certainly apropos. What I'm going to suggest is Councillor Rintoul's motion may begin to address some of your concern, and if you would like to continue after the motion arises, I think that would certainly be okay. Councillor Rintoul?
So thank you. If there's nothing else, then I'll move as a motion arising that staff initiate discussions with the executive director of the Mary Winspear Center regarding the establishment of an agreement to include reporting requirements for provision of the town's annual funding contribution.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Rintoul?
Thank you. So I certainly shared with the Memorial Park Society's board that I anticipated I would come forward to council and look to have a vehicle to further cement the relationship, and that is to provide this reporting requirement in conjunction with funding. And so, look, this is by no means an attempt to, delay funding to the Mary Winspear Center. They're an important economic catalyst in our community when they host events or when they're home to film crews and productions. They add and generate real economic value, not least of which as a community cultural center and the importance there. So I'm not suggesting we delay our ongoing support to the Mary Winsper Center. I'm suggesting that we need to cement, in an operational agreement, an operational funding agreement, the nature of the future reporting. So I would like to see staff start that dialogue with staff at the Mary Winsper Center. Thank you.
Thank you. And the seconder, Councillor Duck?
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul, for that update. That was very refreshing and answered a lot of questions I had outstanding. As a past board member of the foundation, I'm excited to hear what the outcomes are going to be of those reviews, and am in full support of your motion arising, and think it's a great direction for the town to be going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. I'm going to turn back to Councillor Novick. Go ahead.
Well, I'm all for this. I think this is terrific. And this is the direction I believe we should be going in. But to address the comments that you made earlier about the Memorial Park Society thinking that our council liaison was in fact a director or had the role of a director, I'm wondering if that's not a step that we should take as a council to direct that our council liaison accept that position on the board, and that would further, as Councillor Duck suggested, cement the relationship, because it is a significant funding agreement. And if the Memorial Park Society is anticipating that they would like our, and I say our council's expertise on their board, that we should give it to them.
If I could offer a comment, and I'll turn back to Councillor Rintoul as our current liaison, but having served as a director and having served as a council liaison to the board, the interpretation of the Sidney Council liaison or North Saanich Council liaison serving as a director in a director role was never in practice. It is more so come to light that is an aspect of their bylaws, but it wasn't pursued in a practical basis. And I have to say that serving in the roles that I did and the ones we've had passed, that wasn't the expectation of the board of the day, that the Sidney liaison would be serving in that role. I think there will be opportunity, whether it begins with the discussions that staff will have with regards to a funding agreement. There already has been dialogue between our CEO, Mr. Humble, and the executive director regard liaison role. They wanted clarification on the R policy and that sort of thing. So I think this is a good resolution to begin with, and I think that conversation won't necessarily be forgotten. But as we proceed, and in particular, I think all of council, I think the public at large, is keen to know the outcome of this financial review that the Winspear Centre is conducting, and I think we will all be made apprised in good time. I think Councillor Rintoul made reference coming out of the last meeting that this will go into the early part of next year, and we do have the consideration that we're approaching budget time in the first quarter, so we'll be monitoring this. I'll turn it back to Councillor Rintoul, and then, Councillor Novick, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. I totally agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to point out that as councillors with some of our appointments, we do serve in this type of position with other organizations, and it wouldn't be out of character or outside our roles and responsibilities to do so if the opportunity should arise. And I would suggest that, given the situation that has transpired with Memorial Park Society, that it wouldn't be a bad thing for us to do. I just don't know if it's something that council has to pass a resolution on, or if it's something that can simply evolve organically as the agreements with them evolve.
No, thank you, Councillor Novick. I'll turn back to Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And through to Councillor Novick, I would, I think the latter. I think as this progresses and we see how their board addresses this challenge. That we'll continue to evaluate the role of our council liaison. But I think also that it needs to be done in tandem and in discussion with North Saanich, who also have a council liaison to the Memorial Park Society, and so that we would be, I think my suggestion would be taking a unified approach to, the suggestion of any transition. So I would think that this is on everyone's radar now collectively, and that there's no harm in sort of taking this period of time to see how this evolves, and that could very well be a logical next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. Any further questions? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So just echo some of the comments.
Sorry. So we do have a motion on the floor.
Yes.
Okay. So you're speaking to the motion to request staff to begin agreements with
yes.
the Memorial Park Society.
Yeah. So for my first
discussions.
Yeah. So from my first question in regards to that is my assumption is that staff would work on that and then it comes back to council for approval.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I wonder would it be appropriate in that agreement to make some reference to the director role? So moving from, and I know we've talked about maybe it'll happen organically. Is that something? No, staff is shaking their heads.
Thank you. I'll turn to staff. Mr. Hissick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would be best if you let staff report back on this. There are conflict of interest rules around serving two masters, and what you might be doing is recusing yourself from any decision at the council table to do with Winspear funding. So you don't want to do that.
Okay. Okay, so we'll...
I didn't want to mention that because
okay.
This is a direction to staff. So
right. Okay. Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
If you're comfortable. Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favour? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. Then I'll now turn to Councillor Duck to provide his report as our liaison to the Economic Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the late addition to the agenda. Just a very quick heads up to council members that the EAC, the Economic Advisory Committee, met twice in short order for extended sessions to review the Economic Development Plan. And I want to reach out to all of them and to thank them for their contributions, and the sitting chair is in audience tonight, but it was a vibrant discussion on the entire plan and some good submissions, and 2 recommendations will be coming to council on the January 9th meeting. But I'd like to reinforce the opportunity over the holidays if you need some good reading to by the time the final report coming out of the minutes coming out of the final meeting have some good information, which I think would be valuable, given that it's coming to the 9th and being recommended to go to strategic planning on the 12th. I don't want to crowd your calendar between the 9th and 12th. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, no, just a question through you to Councillor Duck. So are the minutes posted now on the EAC? Is that what you were saying, or no?
They are not, no.
So I was just when you're talking about doing some reading over Christmas.
Motivation to staff?
Okay, I see.
You have a script to finish.
Okay, I thought they were posted already.
Okay. Sorry, I did mention during Councillor O'Toole's report that I would seek a motion to receive his verbal report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favour? Motion carries, and a motion to receive Councillor Duck's verbal report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favour? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you again, Councillor Duck. We'll now turn to committee reports, and I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe, who is our representative on the Saanich Peninsula Accessibility Advisory Committee. Your mic, Councillor? Okay, thank you.
So you have some minutes before you. There's some, I think...
Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe, if you could move receipt of the minutes.
Okay, I'll move receipt of the minutes.
Second.
Second, any discussion on the minutes?
Yes. So there's several things in the minutes that, in my opinion, were not recorded accurately. So I want to highlight some of those things now because I think they're important for council and staff to be aware of.
Do you think the minutes will be revised?
Yes, my understanding is that they've already gone out, but they will be I've let them know of the things that I think need to be corrected, but that won't happen until the next meeting late in January.
Is
So-
there a sense of urgency? I'll just leave it for your consideration. You are the representative to the committee.
Yeah,
That,
no,
if the minutes are gonna be revised, that we refer this to a future meeting when the revised
Yeah,
minutes come forward?
there was just a couple things, if I may,
Well, those revised minutes are gonna have to come back to us.
okay, there's just inaccuracies in
Okay,
there.
go ahead, if you wanna highlight,
Okay, well, and
some of the important
also,
ones.
and also for staff's benefit, so I'll just a couple of, there's a few, but the things that I think are most relevant to mention is, in terms of the, when it talks about, in number 8, about accessibility plan updates, what I just wanted to comment there is that it gives the impression that the SPAC, the advisory committee, is preparing an accessibility plan for the municipalities, and that's not really the case. I just wanted to highlight that the requirement for an accessibility plan is a legislated requirement by the province of BC. So it's not the role of SPAC to develop the plan, but the process that SPAC is involved in was doing some research on different types of plans, and they will be providing some recommendations to staff on, here's perhaps a template or a way that you could go about it. So I think that was an important distinction to make. I'll leave it at that. That's probably the most important thing.
No,
There's some-
we appreciate you bringing that forward this evening. If we could amend your if you could move an amendment to your motion to refer it to the, it would just become a referral motion, to refer the motion. I'll turn to Ms. Nelson. We don't want to approve these minutes.
You're not approving them, you're just receiving them for information, so the revised set will come back and you'll be receiving those revised minutes as well.
Thank you. So we can proceed if there's any further discussion.
Okay.
Councillor Novick?
Through yourself to Councillor O'Keefe, I do have a question about what you just described.
Right.
Do the municipalities, or does the provincial legislation require municipalities to have an accessibility plan? And if so, does SPAC act as the body that creates the plan for town of Sidney, North Saanich, and whoever else is involved, or does this have to come back to us, and do we have to have a specialized committee to deal with that?
Yep.
I'll turn to Mr. Humble.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Novak, yeah, so staff are aware of the provincial requirements regarding the preparation of the plan. It is the responsibility of the municipality, not SPAC, to create that plan. We're aware of it. Staff are in discussions with North Saanich and Central Saanich about what a potential approach regarding maybe collaboration with respect to plan. It'll require the hiring of a consultant, and but it'll come back to council. But prior to that, prior to the initiation of an actual plan, we'll provide an approach report to council, and they'll be aware of the process in advance.
And through Mayor to yourself, is there a timeline for this?
The provincial requirement to have a plan in place, I believe, is the end of September of 2023. So we have some time.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, so just to add to that, so the role of SPAC is, what the legislation says is municipalities must create a plan, and in creating their plan, they must consult with their accessibility advisory committee. And so that's, and so what SPAC is doing now is looking at making some recommendations back to our councils in terms of, here's a possible format or a way that we could go about the process. And we'll give that to staff to their consideration, and ultimately up to staff to lead that process.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. So we do have a motion on the floor to receive for information. Seeing no further discussion, all in favour? The motion is unanimous and that carries. So I'm going to divert here because I know we're going to be sometime, because of the committee of the whole meeting reporting out, particularly with the active transportation plan. We've had 2 residents who've have a tree removal request submitted, and they've been patient this evening for a little over 2 hours. So with council's permission, I'm going to go forward to 13A, the request for removal of boulevard trees at 2305 Malaview Avenue. And I would turn to Ms. Clary for an introduction, please.
Point of order.
Yeah.
I think we need a motion to change the agenda.
Turn to Ms. Nelson.
That would be appropriate to get consensus.
So if you want to so move.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We have it moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Duck. I'll turn back to Ms. Clary.
Thank you. So this was a tree removal application to remove 6 town-owned boulevard trees from the boulevard fronting 2305 Malaview. One of the boulevard trees is actually fronting the neighbor's property. However, they're close enough to being approximately in front of 2305 Malaview. The town's arborist has had done a visual inspection of the trees. They've also pruned the trees to allow better access onto the site and to remove some of the deadwood. And no additional arborist report was provided by the applicant. And I'm here if you have any additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. I'll turn to colleagues if there are questions. I'll begin with Councillor O'Keefe.
So just a question just through you to staff in regards to, it looks like we're proposing that they're wanting to replace their drain tiles. And so we're telling them to do this underground method, I guess, to save the tree roots. So I'm trying to understand that a bit better. When I replace my drain tiles on a similarly aged house, they dug up the whole perimeter of the house, and the reason my drain tiles were in a mess was because of the tree roots. So all the tree roots got cut. It was something that had to be done. So I guess what I'm wondering is, it seems like if they're replacing their drain tiles, whether they do it by digging up a big trench like they did in my case, or going underneath to cut out the roots. Is there still going to be damage to the roots either way?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, I believe the town's arborist gave a recommendation to replace the drain tile with a hydro excavator. So you remove the material with basically a big sucker truck, and instead of actually excavating, there may need to be some root pruning done, in which case it could be done by a certified arborist. If it's outside of the drip line of the tree, I'm not an arborist, I must say that, but if it's outside the drip line of the tree, it does get easier to prune roots, and smaller roots could also be pruned by a certified arborist. So there is ways to do work around trees and while keeping the trees alive.
Okay.
Councillor O'Keefe, could I ask a question related to that?
Sure.
So if the applicant proceeds with replacing the perimeter drain tiles, and the contractor that's doing that work discovers that there is roots from these trees, is it incumbent upon the contractor or the homeowner to advise the town so that the town's arborist can become involved, or what's that process in terms of what the homeowners might seek to remedy the situation?
The town's arborist does help in these situations. The homeowner could also work with a third-party arborist as well, but the town arborist, because these are town-owned trees, they could provide guidance as well.
Sorry, I perhaps didn't ask my question accurately. Because they're town-owned trees, is it incumbent upon the property owners or the contractors to contact them if the roots from those trees are impacting the perimeter drainage?
So the town does have a pruning permit process. So if a root is over a certain diameter, they may have to get a permit to prune that root. If it was a third-party arborist, and part of that requirement is that the work is done by a certified arborist. So they would have to have a qualified professional do that work. And if the tree roots are over a certain diameter, if they're pruning them over a certain diameter, so that does mean that there will be a qualified person doing the work, even if it's not the town's arborist per se, but some arborist.
Thank you. I'll turn back to you, Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Yeah, it's still not clear to me. So is what the arborist is saying is that by using this method that he's proposing, that it's going to have a significantly less impact on the tree? I mean, I know when I had mine done, there's no doubt that I think that their drains are clogged with the roots of these trees, so they're gonna get chewed up. And the trees out in front of my house, they're still alive afterwards. So I'm trying to better understand how significantly is it to have that hydrovac system as opposed to just digging a trench.
Yeah, Councillor O'Keefe, I'm just going to make a comment as staff for
Okay.
discussing this. And the thing is we have a tree removal permit request, and we're getting into technicalities about staff advice about how pruning would be done. So I'll turn to staff.
The reason I'm asking is what I
No.
guess, okay.
We'll go to staff.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. So I'm not sure if staff can provide you that level of detail right now. We can maybe get back to you with a more detailed response, but really, I mean, Ms. Clary's not an arborist, as she's indicated, so she may not have the response that you're looking for, the level of detail that you're looking for.
So, and if I may just interject, and if I understand the report, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that while we're making a decision on the tree removal permit request, if it is denied, the town necessarily imposing this method of replacing the perimeter drain tile, or is this an option that staff have indicated, and there would be future discussions between the homeowner and staff, or the homeowner's consulting arborist on how this would proceed?
This is an option that was provided. However, when they are doing the work, they cannot cause the death of the tree. So that is something that needs to be taken in. They can't go in with an excavator and just start ripping up roots. So that is why the hydro excavator was recommended. To my knowledge, I don't know if there's been any excavation on site to see where the tree roots go, but
Okay.
yeah.
I think with the applicants in attendance, there's an understanding of the situation with these trees, and that there would be dialogue between the town, or between the property owner and the town on this. But Councillor O'Keefe, I'll go back to you. You have the floor.
Yeah, and so the reason I'm asking these detailed questions is, it would be nice if we could save the trees. And it sounds like some of the concerns from the homeowners was, fear of, branches falling down, maintenance of the tree. It sounds like that's been addressed or mitigated somewhat. The town has recently pruned the tree, and they will do that in the future. I noticed there's some buckling in the driveway. And then in regards to the drain tiles, I guess what I'm wondering, is it feasible that they could just go in and do their drain tiles the way they wanted to do? And could the trees still survive? So do we have to completely cut down the trees? And that's what I'm trying to understand.
No, we would have to have that, when the roots were exposed, it would have to be reviewed by a certified arborist, and they would have to determine whether or not the root pruning or damage to the roots would cause harm to the tree. So the roots have to be exposed to make that call, and it has to be done by a certified arborist.
So if I may, so
Please continue, Councillor O'Keefe.
So I'm wondering then, would it be better to, rather than go in with an expensive hydrovac system, is it possible to do a section for the arborist to look
Can
at?
I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
That our understanding to date is that an arborist has not consulted, I mean, sorry, we weren't provided by the applicant an arborist report, as it states in the staff report, that if these trees remain and they're going to proceed with the perimeter, that an arborist is going to be involved. And an arborist is going to be the one to indicate what the best way forward is on doing it.
Okay.
So I
Yeah,
appreciate what
I
you're
get
trying
it.
to identify here,
Yeah.
but I think staff is indicating that it's uncertain at this time,
Okay. Yep, thank you.
based on circumstances. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, I believe was next, or is there, then Councillor O'Toole, then Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. I don't see it indicated anywhere in the application or the staff report whether or not there's actually been a visual inspection of the perimeter drain by any kind of plumbing company. Because I'm just wondering, because we're assuming it's the roots, but maybe it's just clay tiles that have cracked, because I had the same problem in my aged house. It wasn't roots, it was just that it's clay tiles, and they just don't last forever.
Through to Councillor Garnett, I'm not aware it's a private property. That's not something the town normally gets involved in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll go to Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff, if I may. You've noted, you made it clear that the applicant didn't provide an independent arborist report. Does staff make that recommendation or suggestion that an application may or should be accompanied by an independent arborist report?
Through to Councillor Rintoul, we typically recommend and at least ask if they will be providing a third-party arborist report.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I recall seeing a request for tree removal without a third-party arborist report to support it, just as an observation. Next, I know the presenter, when he spoke earlier this evening during public participation, made some reference to whether or not there's room for some compromise, which led me to believe that there may be one or two of these trees in particular that are perhaps impacting the property. Was there a discussion with staff around something of that nature, the compromise that was referenced during the presentation?
We would have to get back to you with that. I believe the trees around the driveway are the largest concern, I believe. However, we would have to talk further to the applicant. Okay. And just further to that, on the December 2nd email to the applicant, there was a request if they wanted to provide an arborist report before going to council.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to make an exception, and we can go to a council vote on your wish. But this is a question, and I think with the applicant in attendance, they may wish to comment. Do you wish to come forward and speak to your decision about not retaining an arborist to date? Please come forward and the microphone, activate the microphone. Thank you.
Hello again, everybody. Based on the arborist report from the town of Sidney, we took it that there was some damage to one tree. We did have Bartlett come out. He said medium risk at most, so it may not work in our favor, and having the arborist, a third-party arborist, come out. So we did engage with Bartlett. Again, from our email correspondence with Jen over here, I did reference, it was unfortunate that no one from the city wanted to come out, come to some sort of compromise. There are a few problem trees. I actually have from a built. Do you want me to stop? I can.
Yeah, I was going to say we appreciate you. Wanted to invite you into the meeting just to address the arborist. We are in our deliberations. If something else arises, I will turn to you again. But thank you for taking the question, Councillor O'Toole. Okay, I had my speaking list. Councillor Novak, and then Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through yourself to staff. The one particular tree that to me appears to be most problematic is the one that on the diagram is about 1/3 of the way into the driveway within the boulevard area, and the photograph provided by the applicant shows the roots have clearly perforated the driveway surface. I assume that if the applicant decides to renew his driveway in some way, that root is going to be significantly damaged. Can we assume that the applicant is forbidden from repairing his driveway if there's a possibility that the tree would be damaged?
Ms. Clary?
Through to Councillor Novak, correct. Well, the bylaw prohibits damage to trees and causing the death of a tree. So there is work around trees that can be done. There's methods that can be used. Town staff can advise of different things that town staff do around town. You know, if we removed all trees that were heaving sidewalks, there would be very little trees left on boulevards. So they do work around trees very often, and they can help with ideas on how it could be fixed.
Okay. Thank you. But again, this particular tree appears to be, and again, the diagram may not be accurate in proportion. However, it appears that that one tree is within the area of the driveway. Now, is that something that's normally seen?
If I might interject, is this a decision for an arborist to make? I mean, council, we're presenting circumstances that are in the report.
I believe the diagram is the proposed driveway widening. I believe that may be what you're referring to. So the driveway is not currently widened at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duck.
Yes, just in reviewing the application and the information, the reasons for the request are stated, and it's further down the line that they're addressing drain tile. So I don't know if we're getting into the weeds here relative to what the rationale is behind the removal of the trees. The primary reasons that they want to do it is in terms of personal protection and well-being, and just their concern about the damage that might be caused by these trees. And I think subsequent to the town actually doing some pruning and such, that we've responded to their concerns. There may be additional issues that rise from replacing drain tile, and that's where the arborist is going to be most important in determining that. So I think relative to the rationale for the removal of trees and its subsequent denial, I think we've met the needs of this request.
Okay, so yeah, it's questions through to staff at this stage. We don't have a motion on the floor, but
Yep.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no other questions from colleagues, I'll frame a question through to staff. And that is, there is in the report, it was a question from the applicant and answered within I think the email exchange, and maybe addressed again in the staff report. And that is the town's practice, responsibility for maintenance of town-owned trees. And so I think you know, we've seen instances where the town is proactive in the maintenance, if I can use that term, of town-owned trees. But of course there are, I don't know how many, but it's going to be a large number of town-owned trees, and not every one of them can be on a schedule. Can town staff speak to these particular trees, and whether do they at some point, you know, land on a radar list or of trees that are monitored, or are there trees that the town, due to certain circumstances, does decide to monitor on a periodic basis?
Through to Mayor McNeil Smith, the town, the town's arborist will, you know, drive through and review boulevard trees on an annual basis. However, on an ongoing basis, we do count on residents to report any issues, any hazardous branches, or if something happens to a tree during a storm. That is something that we do count on residents to notify the town about.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you.
Question?
Yes, just through you to staff on that previous point. You know, do we make exceptions to that, especially when these seem to be 6 fairly significant trees? And I know that we're dependent on residents, but you know what, if you depended on me to, you know, tell you when I think there was a bad branch, I don't know that most residents would have the expertise, they're not arborists, to phone up the town and say, I think there's a bad branch. So I'm just wondering what opportunity is there for us to be flexible in that regard, so that if we identify significant trees on the boulevard, can we sort of put them in the queue to make sure that somebody's going there once a year to look at them to see if they need to be tidied up or diseased branches removed?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, the town's arborists are very busy at certain times of the year, especially after major windstorms and different events. The snow event will probably cause several large limb failures. And as far as making a policy to go and review specific trees on a regular basis, it gets very challenging when they get too busy to do those certain things. So adding trees like this to a list where they would have to go review every so often is probably not practical, and therefore could set the town up to be liable if something were to happen in the future.
Thank you, Councillor.
And my understanding is that, from what in the report, is that the town would be liable if there was something that happened. And I think that was one of the concerns of the property owners, is that if the trees aren't maintained and if a branch falls on a car, are we liable for that, or are they, or how does that work?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, if the town were found to be negligent in our maintenance of a tree, which I think would be, considering the trees were just recently pruned, we're not responsible for every branch that falls. That's not negligence. It's negligence where, anyway, again, I'm not a lawyer. Yeah. However, this is from different webinars I've attended around risk around trees. It would come for if we knew a tree was a hazard and we didn't do anything about it, that would be, we would be liable for that. But if a branch falls from a tree that has been taken care of relatively well, it's
okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. So I'll end the questions there. We do have staff recommendation. I'll leave it to council to bring a motion forward. Councillor Duck?
I will move the recommendation for staff that the request to remove the boulevard trees fronting 2305 Malibu Avenue be denied.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. I'll turn to the mover, Councillor Duck.
My apologies for bringing up this earlier, but I think relative to this decision, the staff report was fairly succinct in what they were offering, and there may be further discussion with staff relative to the impact on drain tile and the building, but relatively speaking, in responding to their request, I think we've met all the requirements of the request, and I will be voting in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have to we have an arborist, town arborist, two of them. They're excellent at their job, and this is what the recommendation is, and I support their recommendation. I know they do excellent work in the community. I see them regularly, and I appreciate and respect what they do and their opinion. And as the applicant stated, they didn't feel that it was worth their while to get another arborist. And in light of that, in light of what our arborist is offering and what staff is suggesting, I fully support what they're recommending here. As Councillor Duck has mentioned, I think some of the issues that have been addressed, the pruning's been done. I went by the site more than once, and it's been cleaned up. It looks a lot better than it did a few years ago, having worked in that area. And not knowing exactly what as you said, getting into the drain tiles is not really one of the things listed on the application, but not knowing 100% why there might be flooding in the crawl space. It could be to multiple factors. So I'll stick with my staff's report in this sense, because our arborist is excellent. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe, then to Councillor Novick.
Thank you. I will support the motion to deny the request at this time. However, having said that, if the homeowners were to come back with additional information in terms of an arborist report to show, like, it's not clear to me, like, do we need to cut down 6 trees? If an arborist went out and was able to confirm that this tree roots are the ones that are impacting the driveway or impacting the drain tile, if there was a visual inspection of the drain tiles to confirm, then I would be more inclined to perhaps consider removal of one or more trees. But based on the information provided by the homeowner, I don't feel like I have enough information to accept the removal of the 6 trees. So I'll agree to the vote in support of the motion.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I see something like this, I'm always having some mixed feelings. I believe there's always room for compromise. On the one hand, we have bylaws that have to be respected. On the other hand, we've got young homeowners who are trying to make a go of it in a difficult situation. And I feel that a compromise that would allow the homeowners to accomplish some, if not all, of the work that they anticipated being able to do on their home, most notably in the driveway and with their drain tiles, then perhaps there could be a solution to this problem that wasn't either a black or white affair. I agree that we shouldn't take away all 6 trees, but on the other hand, I'm not of the opinion that trees are sacrosanct, and there is an opportunity perhaps, as the applicant says, that they're quite willing to plant additional trees to replace any that have to be removed. I think perhaps if the applicant came forward with a request to move specific trees and to work around the others, that there might be a different outcome. That being said, I still feel that this is a little harsh on the homeowner, so I will be voting against the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I'm much of the opinion of, I guess, Councillor O'Keefe in that it seems likely to me that some, possibly all of the trees, if they had to do the drainage repair, you know, and they actually had the drainage guys out and they looked at it and said, these have to come out and the trees are in the drains and that's what needs to happen. If I'd had that information that this was what needed to happen for this repair rather than this was what needs to happen so that one day eventually possibly we could do this because they might be a problem, that would have been an easier one to do, especially speaking of, I guess, the compromise Councillor Novak is speaking of, that if we knew what actually needed to be done in order to maintain those real housing repairs, that would have helped. I grew up in a kind of a rural situation where we had very large trees right up against our house and our driveway, and the amount of heaving that frequently comes forward as justification in Sidney for like an unacceptable hazard and damaging to vehicles and the size of the branches are very, very tiny. And so I feel a lot of the justification that we get for tree removals here in Sidney is very subjective and not actually based on real hazards, but based on a perception of danger that may or may not exist. That I am appreciative of the town's arborists being able to kind of put, you know, their opinion for us. I have to trust it at this point, especially when I see pictures and I see the sizes of the branches and the heaving on the driveway, and I think, I don't know, it would have been perfectly normal in Comox or, you know, a rural property in North Saanich. So for now, I will vote with this motion. However, if the homeowners, you know, did have a plan and a requirement, you know, something that said from their contractors that something needed to come out in order to do the drainage repairs, I would definitely be amenable to changing and, you know, reconsidering for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question. All in favour? Opposed? Councillor Novick is opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. So we'll return to our previous item on the agenda, and I just have to go back here a step. So we had done 12A, which was the Accessibility Advisory Committee. We'll now turn to 12B, which is Committee of the Whole meeting of December 12th. Councillor Garnett was the chair of that meeting. Councillor Garnett, just before you proceed, would certainly have you begin with moving approval of the minutes. But the first recommendation is regarding the active transportation plan. If you could set that one aside and proceed with the other motions, I'll come back to that and we'll resume our meeting on that. Thank you.
Point of order.
Councillor Duff?
You're amending the agenda. You need to have a motion to amend the agenda if you're moving.
I think the order that the recommendations are made, I'll turn to Ms. Nelson if we need to have a motion with regards to reading out the recommendations from minutes of a meeting.
Well, the order of the agenda shows as reading of the minutes and then going to R1. So I guess, you know, if you want to amend it in any kind of way, like you moved item 13A, then I guess, yes, the best way to do it was through a resolution, a motion to move it.
I'll turn to Councillor, well, I'll make the motion to move recommendation 1 to the last recommendation in the Committee of the Whole minutes.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Garnett.
I'll move the minutes be received.
Second.
Any discussion? There is omissions or discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
The committee recommends, and I so move, recommendation number 2, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, that's 246 feet, of 9645 5th Street, be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100327 to locate heat pumps within the front and exterior side yard, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Recommendation number 3, the committee so moves and I recommend that development permit application number DP 100834 to permit the form and character of a 36-unit multi-unit apartment development for the properties at 2370, 2372, and 2374 Oakville Avenue be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for review and comment.
Second.
Second, I just want to address the speaker who came forward with regards to this. Oh, sorry, this is Oakville. My apologies.
Yep.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries.
Recommendation number 4, committee recommends and I so move that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, that's 246 feet, of 2245 Markinch Place be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100329 to reduce the required minimum setback for a heat pump, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries unanimous.
Recommendation number 5, committee recommends and I so move that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, that's 246 feet, of 2071 Malibu Avenue West be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100330 to vary the maximum permitted fence height, and then any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Novick? No? So I just want to speak to thanking the speaker for coming forward this evening with regards to the telephone poles and the sidewalks. It was an item that was raised at the last meeting.
Point of information, that's the next resolution.
Sorry, I've seen Malaview. Okay, thank you.
Recommendation number 6, the committee recommends and I
Sorry, I didn't call the question.
Oh, sorry.
So I will call a question. All in favor?
Sorry.
Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
My apologies. Recommendation 6, the committee so recommends and I so move that development permit application number DP 100835 to permit the form and character of a 16-unit, 2.5-story multi-unit townhouse development and development variance permit application number DV 100319 to relax the minimum required front setback for the properties at 10137, 10145, and 10147 5th Street and 2411 Malibu Avenue be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for review and comment.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and I am getting my progressive lenses changed so I can have to take my glasses off to read. Is thank the speaker, Mr. Carlson, for coming forward, making reference to the telephone poles. And in a question through to staff, at our last meeting, staff indicated that that is considered during frontage improvements, and the frontage improvements are done after the development, or discussed at the time of issuance of the development permit, or the building permit, I'm sorry, which?
It's, the frontage improvements are not the subject of the development permit or
Right.
variance permit. It would be done through the civil engineering process and prior to the issuance of building permit.
Building permit, thank you. Thank you. So it was addressed with, thank you again for bringing it this evening, and I think we'll, as a community, want to look at that going forward. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? None are opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Garnett. So now we'll turn to recommendation number 1, the active transportation plan, and the recommendation coming out of the committee of the whole meeting after an hour and 40 minutes of presentation, questions, and questions of the presenter, questions of staff, and some discussion. We referred it to this evening's meeting to continue that. So we do not have a motion on the floor, but as we left off with questions through the staff, we could resume with any questions through the staff this evening, or we could proceed with considering the staff recommendation. I will turn to the pleasure of council. Councillor Duck.
I will read in the staff recommendation, and so move that the staff be authorized to proceed with public engagement for the draft active transportation plan as outlined in this report.
Second.
Seconder, Councillor Duck is the mover.
Nothing at this time.
Okay, Councillor O'Keefe.
Just a question through you to staff in terms of engagement. So as I mentioned last time, I think it would be important for the Accessibility Advisory Committee to weigh in on the active transportation plan. So I'm wondering whether I should refer the active transportation plan to SPAC for their review and comment, or whether it's better to have the consultant or staff consult with SPAC to include them specifically in the engagement process. And I guess what's in my mind is we could send, the lengthy report to them and say, go at it, give us your comments. But then I understand in the next phase of the engagement, there's plans we talked about having a little bit of a presentation first, town halls and that sort of thing, to allow people to have a better understanding of what's in the plan. So I'm sort of torn on what would be the best route to go in order to get, the type of feedback that we'd like to get from the Accessibility Committee.
Thank you. We just have staff conferring, and we'll just wait a moment. I think one of the considerations is, whether a committee is considering this and making comments, or whether, given that we're going to engagement at large in the community, whether certainly any members of SPAC and anybody else with concerns regarding disability would have the opportunity to come forward.
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. So I guess from a staff perspective, I guess there's options that council can consider. In particular, if they want to involve a particular committee or organization within the municipality, and one is to just make sure that they're aware of the engagement opportunities that exist, and we can certainly make sure the SPAC members are aware of all of the opportunities regarding input, and they could provide their input via that means rather than through the committee directly. That's one option, but it's up to council really in terms of process and what you feel is necessary.
Thanks, that's helpful, Mr. Humble. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Through you back to SAC. I'm wondering if it might be possible to do something similar like we did with the chief when we were talking about getting input for emergency planning from SPAC. And so he attended a SPAC meeting, gave an overview of our emergency plan and how they go about it. So whether I might be inclined to make a motion that involved a staff member attending SPAC to provide a brief overview of the active transportation plan and to allow SPAC members to then send their comments.
Sorry, send their comments as a committee or as individuals?
I would say both.
I'll turn to staff.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately a council decision. I guess it's an additional layer of engagement that would be required, and staff obviously would have to take the time to prepare that sort of specific presentation, I guess, focused on accessibility, and so there would be a level of staff, time and resource for something like that, for sure.
Okay, so I'm wanting to comment on this, and we don't have a motion on the floor. So, Councillor Keefe, I'll ask if you want to move a recommendation, put it on the floor, and council can express their view.
Point of order, there is a motion on the floor. I moved, and Councillor Keefe seconded.
Yeah, so I
Okay,
guess I would,
so the motion would be an amendment to the motion that's on the floor?
oh, okay. Or I was thinking motion arising, but.
Okay, so do you wish to leave it till the motion, consider as a motion arising?
Sure.
Okay.
Cleaner.
You still have the floor. Did you wish to continue? on another
No,
item?
not on this point.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to the seconder, I believe. Or you were the mover, so I'm sorry. And the seconder, so we have it open for discussion. Councillor O'Toole and Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased to support the motion. On the front end engagement, my personal takeaway was that the input was light. I don't think we had a true reflection of the community's wants and desires around certain aspects of active transportation. But this plan gives them, the community at large, the opportunity to become familiar with the direction that's outlined in this draft. And I'm really, really pleased that we have a communications manager on town staff, because the last time we went out with a major infrastructure project, we didn't. And I don't even think it was clear that we were looking at options and that we were in a sort of draft stage. And now, I hope the community will recognize that this is a draft and that we've got the opportunity with their input to look to how we kind of refocus the plan in the next phase, because I don't think it's perfect. I think a lot of work went into it. I'm very appreciative of the direction that staff have taken along with the consultant on this project, but that I personally have some concerns around some of the elements, including the elimination of parking in the commercial core, that I look forward to hearing what the community's comments are. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to continue on what Councillor O'Toole just mentioned, I have some concerns as well. While I like the plan in principle, and I think the ideas espoused by the plan are something that we should all be looking at for our health and for the well-being of the town, I think it's a great plan. That being said, there are some concerns that I have, and more specifically about the parking. You may have seen questions that I put to our CAO earlier today, and the answers he provided me were, well, to be quite honest, I was quite surprised. We'll be losing approximately 150 parking spaces at a minimum, and that in itself is not such a problem. However, there are no plans to mitigate that. And I know that he told me that there's going to be a parking study, and I think there's an opportunity here to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I don't know the best way to approach this, and perhaps you can help me find a way to ensure that parking is not ignored, or that the results of what happens to the parking as a result of this active transportation program is not ignored in future projects that come before this council. I think it's critical. I can say with certainty that I probably canvassed very close to 1,000 homes during the election. And the one item that kept coming back to a much greater extent than any other single item was the question of on-street parking. It is on the minds of a much larger percentage of our town's population than I would have thought. And I just fear that we might be creating a monster with this ATP if we don't have a plan to deal with that. And so I'm looking for some additional suggestions. Perhaps you can help. If not, then it's going to be up to our parking study to mitigate the effects of this ATP, which I think in itself is good.
Thank you, Councillor Novick, for bringing that forward, and I'll begin to comment, and I see Councillor Duncan has her hand raised as well. And that is that, as Councillor Rintoul has indicated and staff have indicated, this is a draft. It's a living document. And what our work, as our job as council is at the moment, is to make a decision, is this draft ready enough to go to public consultation? And if through the concerns that a member of council has, they feel that there is some aspect of the plan that is not ready to go to public engagement, then you can recommend an amendment to the plan, recommend an amendment to this draft that would have to be done by staff / the consultant, would change the timeline of the process to a degree, but that is the option of the council member. What I would highlight, or what I would stress, I think, is that there are many components to this active transportation plan. There is the sidewalk infrastructure, the growth of the sidewalks. There is crosswalks. There's traffic circles. There's traffic diversion. There's speed control. There's many different elements, and we're seeking to have community engagement for opinion on, or for views on all of these aspects. I expect there will be concerns raised with regards to the parking and that sort of thing, but that is part of what is currently this draft. And so it does come back to, do you wish, given the concerns that you have at this stage, to request a change to this draft before it goes to public engagement? So the other aspect is we've indicated this is a living document. Staff have also indicated in the process to go forward is that after those different engagement approaches, and there are different approaches for engagement, staff will summarize will review all of that engagement feedback, and that they will make the amendments as professionals that they feel they need to make to that draft. The engagement process then indicates that the amended draft, if it's amended after the staff and consultants see the recommendations, whether it's amended or not, it would then go to a second 2-week consultation, only a survey process. And so there will be opportunities going forward to make changes, and I think it's helpful, and now I'm starting to motivate, but I think it's helpful for us to have community engagement before we, unless you feel otherwise and you want to bring something forward. But I think those are your options.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My concern is that I don't feel that it's in the public interest to hamstring the active transportation program with this parking issue. I think the parking issue is in itself important enough to warrant either a separate discussion or, as our CAO indicated to me, a study, which is, I understand, to be scheduled early in the new year. My concern is that I don't wish the ATP to be delayed or stalled because of something that essentially should not be part of the ATP. The parking issue, I think, is a separate issue. It is a consequence of the ATP. We can't implement the ATP without having some effect to parking, but there must be a way to create a connection between that and the parking study to ensure that the issue of lost parking spaces doesn't fall through the cracks. That's my concern. I don't want to cripple the ATP because of a separate issue, which is of equal and widespread importance. So I don't know the best way to create that liaison, to create that tie-in to the parking study, to make sure that we're not, as I said earlier, throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Thank you, Councillor Novick, and I two further comments, and one is that I made reference to there being different aspects of the active transportation plan in terms of sidewalks or traffic circles or crosswalks, and certainly the cycling. But there are 9 priorities in the cycling, 9 priority recommendations within the cycling. Not all of them have loss of parking. 2 of them do, on Lochside and on Bevan, but not all of them do. And so I think, again, if the active transportation plan is seen in the context of this whole, and these are aspects to it, residents in certain parts of the community or in several parts of the community may have concerns or suggestions with regards to a particular aspect of the transportation plan. I don't think you would suggest, given that there are 9 priorities and they don't involve parking, that people are just going to be against all the bicycling because of removal of some parking. They may want to address the cycling corridor that has a particular parking change. So I'll leave that comment there. I want to turn to staff with a question, and that is, Councillor Novick made reference to the parking study. I think staff have indicated elsewhere that the parking study is actually is currently underway. We know this process, the engagement is going through January, February, and early March, and then back to a second engagement. Can staff speak to when the parking study might be completed and come forward to council?
Through to the mayor, we expect it to come forward in Q1 2023, so February or March.
Okay, so I think there's an intersection through that parking study coming forward long before council is making final decisions or considering the public input on the draft. I don't know if that's helpful.
Well, fair enough. Again, if there's some way to communicate to the people doing the parking study, I assume they're professionals, that A, this concern exists, and B, it would be the will of the council, and I don't know if we need to make a motion to have that happen, that they consider this in their study.
Well, I think given staff has responded to your concern with regards to a parking study, and I think staff will be, through the engagement process, will certainly be able to communicate.
Fair enough.
And as Councillor Rintoul pointed out, our communications manager will be helpful in that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my concerns have been addressed.
You're welcome. So I have to confess, because I wanted to make an amendment and I don't want to make it yet, or a motion arising. We have a motion on the floor, and the next speaker is Councillor Duncan. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was worried you'd forgotten about me and you're going to move on to the next thing.
I have to look in 3 directions.
Yeah, thank you. I'm perfectly happy with this report going as it is. With all due respect to Councillor Novak, there is nobody who has ever done anything regarding bicycling who does not know that people are very anxious about parking spots. No one. It is around the world since bike lanes were created. The biggest thing that comes up every single time for the past 50 years is that residents lose their minds about losing parking spots. Businesses do, but usually to a lesser extent. And so they will for sure know that's an issue. They will certainly know it's an issue in Sidney because it's also been a major issue here for as long as I've been here, so well over 10 years. And to that point, I would say one of the things that these consultants will also know is that all of the data that has ever been collected, which is sadly not enough, I asked staff to see if there'd been data collected specifically for Victoria. I knew there was some for Vancouver. But every time somebody has done data collection, they have found no impact to retail businesses from the installation of bike lanes that required the loss of parking. It has been either it has been neutral to a positive in that it usually increased the amount spent at those retail businesses by the foot traffic and the cyclists who are accessing the sites. There are certain types of businesses that can sometimes suffer from the loss of the parking spaces or the loss of car access. Those were auto-centered, so gas stations, car parts, car retailers, and big box stores, which are all things that are not on these cycling corridors, and big box stores are not something that we have in Sidney in the first place. So with regard to the impacts, just based on data that exists, I'm not concerned going forward. And that we are collecting specifically parking study data for these corridors. When we say things like we're going to be removing X number of parking spaces, it gives people the impression we're removing those number of cars actually accessing those spots, which is of course not true. Those spots are, those corridors are not 100% utilized. Bevan in particular is highly utilized in certain blocks and virtually empty in others. So it's not a matter of that we're losing 140 cars accessing that area. We're losing a piece of space in which those cars could theoretically go, but might actually only be displacing, say, an actual 35 or 40 or 50 cars accessing that area. And I think that's going to be something that's important for the consultants to really bring forward from our parking study about what's actually being used there and what's actually being displaced. And that when we are considering whether residents are concerned about it, that we actually weigh it against data that we have, and businesses, and whether or not they're specifically concerned about their business and any information they may have about their patrons, I would weigh more heavily than whether residents are concerned about it. People frequently can become very concerned about issues that are not necessarily something that is an impact. I mean, a hilarious example, I just listened to a great podcast about the satanic panic of the 80s. People were very concerned about things that were not happening. So I just want to make sure that we use a data-driven approach rather than one where simply the existence of a concern is taken as something that would have higher weight. I think it will also be really important, as the mayor has pointed out, to note that this is a 10-year plan, and certain corridors have no parking removal and some have high parking removal, and that we can choose which ones go through. And to portray this as some sort of binary that gets talked about as, do we have bike lanes or do we have parking? This is the thing that ended up, being a big controversy in other cities, and it's simply not portraying it accurately. And I really don't want that to be the narrative that comes out here. I also say, when we talk about building infrastructure over 10 years, to remember how our demographics will be changing in those 10 years. I know people keep saying we're going to be getting older, but it's just not, unless we have a lot of outside migration, it seems very unlikely, particularly with the economic conditions we have, that very large numbers of very elderly people are going to be Sydney's future, say 10 years from now. And that people who are wealthy enough to have cars that they can drive just within the distance of Sidney is not likely to be part of Sydney's future as well.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think it's, from my perspective, it's important to actually look at the recommendation, which is to send it out for the next phase of public engagement. And for me, I think it is ready to go. It's a full document. There's lots in there. I have no doubt in my mind that we're going to hear about parking from people. So I have no concerns about that being missed at all. I assume that staff's preparing themselves diligently for that feedback. I would just want to make one other comment about Councillor O'Keefe and the SPAC, and I'm wondering, instead of having staff make a presentation, if maybe when you report out, you could do one. You're an excellent researcher, and you know the areas that they're going to want to be more focused on, and perhaps you can provide something in the detail of what they might draw more out of to provide comment to. That's just a suggestion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to Councillor Duck.
Yes, I'm going to echo what Councillor Garnett's just said, that the recommendation is from staff for this to go to public. So they believe it's ready to go. So certainly we've given lots of input and ideas of things we see as concerns or issues, and I think the public will echo that. We had a presenter in public participation that echoed that. And so I think all things said, staff think it's ready to go, and we'll have our questions, and we've had our questions, and we'll have more questions, I'm sure. Certainly there will be questions about the parking, and I can't agree with all the comments that are said, but it is an active transportation plan. It is going to compromise parking. That's the intent, is to make it more pedestrian and cyclist friendly to the community, and that will ultimately result in changes to parking for cars. Keeping in mind that we are the destination center for a rural community, so there'll still be people driving in here. So we just have to be, as Councillor Novak mentioned, we just have to be aware of that as we move forward, and I think the downtown parking study will do that. It is, I think, important that we start to reach out and ask the community what they think, and I would suggest, as Councillor Garnett does, that we try and do that in rather than individual presentations to organizations, because I would be of the same mind as that, okay, let's do a presentation for the Sidney Community Association, because by failure of communication, not on the part of the town, but the Community Association wasn't engaged in the initial round, so there would be an opportunity equally to do a presentation to there, and I would be willing to do that as a councillor, so hopefully we can reach out to the different organizations we know and do that similarly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. So we have the staff recommendation moved and seconded on the floor, and we've had discussion. Any further discussion? Councillor Novak.
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, and thank you. I just want to make sure that I haven't been misunderstood. I do support the plan as it has been presented. I am happy with it going to public engagement. My concern was simply that we do not forget about the parking that will ensue from the implementation of this plan. It will be an issue. End of story.
Thank you, Councillor Novak. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Keefe, did you have a motion arising?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that the draft active transportation plan be referred to the Saanich Peninsula Accessibility Advisory Committee for their review and comment, and that staff prepare a short presentation to be presented to SPAC.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Novak seconded for discussion. Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, well, I think it's important. I mean, active transportation, we're talking about people with mobility challenges, that we absolutely have to tap into them. And, you know, the comment's been made that, well, yeah, they can just participate like everybody else. I think there's something by sending it to SPAC that is more meaningful. First of all, we're acknowledging that there's a group of people that are focused on this issue. And so tapping into their lived experience. It's an opportunity for those members to discuss it around a table along themselves. And it's a way to document all those accessibility issues in one place, rather than getting them disjointedly, individuals sending them in on their own. The other thing that's of value with SPAC is that the three participating municipalities learn from each other. So when one municipality brings forward something, a referral, the other three municipalities are there to hear what is the information that SPAC brings back in terms of recommendations. So if other municipalities are doing active transportation studies or that sort of something to that end in the future, it's a way of putting all of those accessibility sort of concerns and issues in one place. So I think it's, yeah, maybe it's a little bit more of staff time to do that, but I think it's a good investment.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Novak as the seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After the 2021 census, the population numbers of our town were 45% over the age of 65. The 2016 census was 41%, and I would suggest that by the time the next census comes around, it'll be over 50%. And as our population percentage increases in that demographic, the number of people who will need accessibility accommodation will only grow. It will not get smaller. I think that it would be wise on our part to ensure that if we're spending the kind of money that we will be spending on this ATP, that we ensure that we are meeting state-of-the-art engineering and design to ensure that those people with accessibility requirements are accommodated to the best way possible. And I think by forwarding this to SPAC for their review and comment, it would just ensure that it's given another set of eyes with a slightly different perspective and understanding. And even small changes in engineering might make large differences for people who have mobility issues. So I fully support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novak. Councillor Dutt?
I support the motion with one corollary, I guess, is that do we need to involve staff in creating a presentation when we have a fully fledged plan in place that could be just presented to SPAC and for their review and input on, rather than engaging staff to take it out and make an actual presentation out of it? Because I would further that to say, okay, then are we going to reach out to other interest groups such as TRNRG, which is Tuesday Night Riding Group, which is an active cyclist group in town, and since the majority of this ATP is around cycling, are we going to engage a group that would be giving feedback on that aspect of it? Similarly, the Sidney Community Association, should there be a presentation to them on it? So are we opening the opportunity to other presentations to organizations that have an invested interest in all three of those two in different aspects? And I'm suggesting that we have the ATP in its context and it is fully readable by anyone to take it on and read it and to provide feedback as both an individual and as an organization.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. We're going to allow first-time speakers. Councillor Keefe, is there anyone else wishing to speak for a first time? I'll speak, and I won't support this motion. And it's not that I see the benefit of having SPAC, but staff have through the presentation and the discussion we've had last meeting and today, we're aware of how robust the engagement process will be. There will be multiple opportunities for individuals to participate, and I think the suggestion that staff gave as a consideration for us. They didn't give it to us as a recommendation, they gave it to us as a consideration, but I'm putting it forward as a recommendation, is that staff can certainly communicate with SPAC, the Business Improvement Association, the Sidney Community Association. I can name probably 10 other organizations that have an interest in this at some part of our community, to make them aware of all the engagement opportunities. And I think the individuals who have the opportunity to participate, attend these engagement sessions and get their questions answered, and participate. I know a comeback, if you will, or a comment to that is that there is a synergy involved when a committee gathers to consider recommendations or a plan this size, and I won't dispute that. However, I think that given the complexity of this plan, and given the multiple engagement opportunities that are provided and the precedent it sets of going out to a particular organization, I think there are other organizations that would immediately jump to mind to put on the list, and such as the Sidney Business Improvement Association or others that I won't continue to name. So I'll leave my remarks there, and I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, my understanding of the motion is that staff are being asked to prepare a presentation. So in my mind, that's a PowerPoint that Councillor Keefe can take back and present along with the ATP. I don't think we're looking at staff going to 12 to 15 different community organizations and doing this. I think it's incumbent on a council liaison, frankly, to use the opportunity at their intersects to raise awareness of the ATP. So all I've heard in this motion is that a presentation be prepared, or that staff prepare a presentation. To me, it's a 5-10 minute PowerPoint that the council liaison can present. I didn't hear anything about staff going and presenting. I would suggest we move forward. We're getting into the weeds here. It's getting a tiny bit frustrating for me. I would like to see us keep this moving forward. And if Councillor O'Keefe was content with the understanding that it may well just be a PowerPoint presentation, then we're all welcome to use it and we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Two are opposed, Councillor Duck, Councillor myself. The motion carries. Thank you. I have a motion arising, but before I read it, I would like to ask a question of staff, and that is the engagement process going forward through to completion of the active transportation plan by approval by council. Will the consultant be involved in all further stages?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So my recommendation is motion is as follows: that the summary of engagement feedback after the first engagement opportunities, an amended draft come back to council before the final 2-week review period occurs.
Second.
So moved and seconded, and so again, we're aware of in the current engagement plan that staff have proposed that when the summary feedback engagement, when they produce the summary feedback engagement and then amended the draft, it would not come back to council. It would go back to a second round of public engagement. And I think there's an opportunity for council to consider, again, not necessarily that we're going to want to be making specific changes to the draft ATP or to that draft of the ATP at that time, but that it will give us some insight in terms of what the community feedback has been, and just have more awareness as the next step of engagement goes forward. Councillor Duck, is the second?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate this motion coming forward because it was a strong part of our discussion, and I really support this idea of having a chance to look at the comments, and maybe I think that was part of the conversation was that there's going to be a lot of questions out there, and if we can see them, respond to them, and have an opportunity for the consultant and the staff to see if there's any retweaking or tooling that we can do that makes it clear to take it forward. And I think there were a number of occasions that there was a need for clarity that I think will come further out in the consultation with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff, I'm just wondering if how staff views this added layer in terms of timing, in terms of the grant application.
Through to Councillor Garnett, the extension for the grant application hasn't actually been submitted yet. They recommended we do that in January after we hear initial feedback, so we can delay it a little bit longer, extend it by an extra month for this reason.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Councillor Novak?
Thank you, Mayor. To make sure I understand this correctly, you're asking for a draft to be brought back to council before it goes for final approval. Is that correct?
Sorry, the staff as
after it's gone to public review.
I think the simplest way to rephrase it from what I said earlier is that from today there's a 2-stage engagement process. There will be a more lengthy engagement process with multiple different channels or opportunities for engagement, such as the surveys, such as open houses, such as a Zoom participant, and so on. Staff will take the feedback from that, create a summary, and then as they determine, they will or not make amendments, make changes to the draft that we have before us today. The second stage is was then to take that revised draft to a second round of engagement, and the only engagement opportunity is as I understand it now, is a 2-week survey.
Okay, so it would come back to council then
after the first set of engagements.
Yes. So I'm not quite sure how to propose this or phrase this, but I would like to see that draft with the amendments shown or with the changes shown from the original plan.
And that's the intention.
Is
through
that
this
something
motion.
that would happen automatically?
Yeah, through the wording of the motion is that the summary of engagement feedback and amended draft come back to council.
Fair enough, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? None are opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. Are there any other motions arising? Seeing none, I want to thank council for all the questions and deliberations, and thank you staff for the presentation and taking all questions. Turning back to the agenda, we are now down to staff reports, and we're under item 13A. No, we're not. We did 13A. We're going to, sorry, we're going to 12B.
Top of page 4, 13B.
Oh, sorry, I labeled it as 12B. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, might we take a pause sante?
I will call a 5-minute recess for us to reconvene at 9:25. Thank you. Jesus, I got two 12Bs on my agenda. And no eraser. I can't use the electronic version because it doesn't have the recommendation, all of the recommendations in it. Or like we do at COD. Doesn't have all the recommendations. Okay, we'll reconvene our meeting. Thank you to everyone. And if I have my numbering right, we're now at 13B, the request for street vending license, Beacon Brewing. And I'll turn to Ms. Clary for an introduction, please. Or sorry, I will put my glasses on and turn to Mr. Newcomb for an introduction. Good evening, Mr. Newcomb.
Good evening, thank you. So this report is addresses an application from Beacon Brewing to have a food truck located outside their business in the public street for 4 hours on New Year's Eve. The town does have a policy which requires council approval for applications like this for public street vending. The applicant has proposed two options, one in the public parking lot behind the building, and another option being out in the street outside their front door in the parallel parking on 3rd Street. Staff believe that the 3rd Street location is the most appropriate choice in this situation. And we also believe that the application is reasonable. It's an overall net benefit to the community given the circumstances, that the time frame is reasonable, and the location proposed is also reasonable. So for that reason, we recommend approval with conditions noted. Thank you.
Mr. Newcomb. I'll turn to council if there are any questions. Seeing no questions, we have a staff recommendation.
And I so move the recommendation by staff that Beacon Brewing be granted approval to operate a food truck from public property on 3rd Street immediately adjacent to their business entrance between the hours of 1700 and 2100 on December 31st, 2022, subject to the following conditions. 1, that the applicant meets all requirements of street vending policy DV010. 2, that prior to the issuance of the business license, the applicant provides proof of island health approval and the required liability insurance. And 3, that waste generated from the business be prohibited from being deposited in municipal waste containers.
Second.
Discussion, Councillor Duff.
I fully support this, as staff have indicated. And it's the hours are right. It's you know, I'm fully approval of things that are going to happen in our new entertainment district, and so I think this would add a funnel aspect to New Year's Eve, and with little impact. I would suggest that maybe we need to make sure there's some communication that go out to the people that are resident in that area on the 2 sides of the street, just to let them know it's happening. It would be appropriate to make sure they're just aware and can join in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. Councillor O'Toole, as a seconder. Any discussion, Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, we've heard in the past some local businesses in terms of food have had concerns about food trucks. And I think given the busyness of the night, it's not likely to be a factor. But if it is, we'll hear from these operations and we can adjust going forward. So I'm supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett, I have a question through to staff, and that is, sorry, the motion's on the floor, so I'll make a comment first, and then I'll have a question through to staff. And my comment is, I'm generally supportive of this, but this is a unique application compared to the policy that we set. And so the policy that we set at the time gave consideration to the types of food vendors, whether they be food trucks or carts, because we've had carts on the waterfront and Beacon Park and that sort of thing. And the way the policy was set up was really to address these sorts of vendors who are not permanent businesses, do not have the fixed costs of other businesses in the business district, locating in usually a closed venue. So the Sidney Street Market, or we closed the street 20 times in 2019 for different events, and at some of those events there would be vendors. So there was a road closure. It was part of a larger event, and these were seen beneficial to that event. This is not associated with an event per se. It's not associated with a road closure. And so my question through to staff is, with the existing policy, having quickly reviewed the existing policy, it wasn't the intent if a food cart, for example, wanted to rent space in Beacon Park, that they would pay, they would have some sort of rent payment or lease payment to the town if they want to operate for 10 Saturdays in the summertime. They basically received permission to do that, but they didn't. They had to submit a deposit of about, I think, $500, but that was due to that was associated with the conditions of the permit, not intended to be rent to the town. So in essence, that we have a private business using open public right-of-way to operate their business, and there's no rent involved. So I just would, if staff have a comment with regards to the intent of the policy as it's been implemented in the past and how this application is unique.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I think the policy, my understanding of council's intention when this policy was adopted was that it would accommodate sort of, yes, special events, but also unique circumstances where the intent was not to operate a food truck on an ongoing basis. Like, you know, in some cities in Victoria, the food trucks are in certain locations 24/7, including in some public rights of way. But instead, in Sidney, the approach has been to have sort of a special approach, special type of occasion approach to this. And, you know, staff think this sort of fits in with that approach. The intent is not to have the food truck here permanently, but it's sort of a unique New Year's Eve type of situation. There was a bylaw proposed quite a few years ago now that did sort of propose to take the approach of you know, cost for using town space, but it was definitely more of that permanent approach as opposed to this sort of one-off policy-oriented approach. And the council of the day chose not to go with that. So it's very much still a unique situation type of policy approach rather than cost recovery and things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. That's helpful, and I remain supportive of this. It is a unique event. It's unique because of the occasion. It's unique that it's only open for, I think, 4 hours from 5 till 9, and it's taking just a few parking spaces. I don't see us necessarily setting a precedent. You know, future applications would come forward, and we can consider those circumstances, including whether there's any cost recovery to consider. So I'll leave my comments there. Councillor Novick?
I'm supportive of this in principle, but the point being that there is certainly an opportunity for this to become an ongoing thing. As Sidney continues to develop, there may be opportunities for this other times, other places. And I'm just wondering if we have any kind of a policy on this, or if we should consider looking, maybe directing staff to develop a policy on the question of occasional food trucks rather than permanent food trucks. I think, Mr. Mayor, your comments were appropriate in that the city should not be revenue neutral on this or revenue negative. I think there should be some kind of licensing for this to be on public space. But again, since we don't presently have that type of program, I certainly wouldn't stall this application as a result, but I think it's an opportunity for us to, again, go back to staff and perhaps consider this for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Novick, and I did make reference that, you know, the staff did include the current policy in the agenda package, and while it might not foresee, you know, if there was repeated requests in the future on this, I think this is a unique one-off situation, and if other requests come forward in the future, council can certainly take the direction to request staff review of policy changes. I'll see no further discussion. I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And we're moving to 13C, which is the renewal of cost-sharing agreements with North Saanich, and I'll turn to Mr. Hissick for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The town and the district of North Saanich have 4 long-standing agreements for cost-shared services, including the RCMP, the library, the Rotary Park facility, and the senior center. 3 of those 4 expiring agreements are before council for renewal tonight. And if you would like me to briefly go through each one, I'm prepared to do so.
Okay, I will turn to council if you wish to further introduction. I think it was a good report. Seeing None. Thank you, Mr. Hisik, and I'll turn to council if there are any questions. Seeing none, we have a recommendation. Councillor Rintoul.
I'll move the recommendation that the following cost-sharing agreements with the District of North Saanich be approved. 1A, the RCMP premises agreement. B, the library. C, baseball facility Rotary Park operating agreement. 2, that the baseball facility Rotary Park license agreement between the town of Sidney, the District of North Saanich, and the Peninsula Baseball and Softball Association be approved. And 3, that the sublease between the Victoria Airport Authority and the town of Sidney and the District of North Saanich be amended by extending the term of the sublease for an additional 10 years to April 30th, 2032.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Rintoul, second by Councillor Duck. Councillor Rintoul?
No, thank you.
Councillor Duck? Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the only concerns I had around the library and Rotary Park operating agreement have been dealt with by staff significantly, so I'm appreciative of this, and I'll be recommending, supporting the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll turn to 13D, which is agreement renewal for animal control services, and I'll turn to Mr. Hisik again.
The town has a long-standing arrangement with the CRD bylaw to perform our animal control services, and the most recent contract expires at the end of this year. We've received a new draft and have reviewed it and are recommending renewal for a 3-year term with 2 one-year renewal options. It's important to note that there really are no viable alternative service providers, and we are satisfied with the with what we're getting through CRD.
Thank you, Mr. Hisik. I'll turn to council if there are any questions. Seeing none, we have a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that the agreement renewal between the town and the Capital Regional District for Animal Control Services be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussions? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Now we'll go to 13E, which is the monthly building report for the month of November 2022.
We've received for information.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Council. Any discussion? No. I'll call a question. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. And we'll turn to the first of 3 pieces of correspondence. The first is under 14A. We have 6 letters from a number of community organizations regarding considerations of priorities for council strategic planning, which will commence in early next year. And we have a recommendation.
I move the recommendation that they're referred to strategic planning.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? That motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll go to 14B, which is the status of contamination of Qualset Creek, also Ray Creek. A letter from Mr. Wainwright dated December 14th.
I'll move the recommendation. It's referred to strategic planning.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to thank the former Councillor Wainwright for bringing this forward. It is something that is part of the overall making sure that area is clean, and I think it's good that we're keeping it on our radar moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. And seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? None are opposed. The motion carries. So we're now raising, we raised 15.9 in the additional piece of correspondence from the Summergate strata as 14C, and I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe who requested it being raised.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is something that I think in light of the correspondence we received today from Summergate, that I'd like to, I'll make a motion if I may, to rescind that and then have discussion. Is that how you'd like to proceed?
Yeah, if you could proceed with, if you're making a motion to rescind a previous motion, we will have a seconder, then discussion and a vote.
Okay. So I'll move that council rescind its resolution of November 28th, 2022, which was that the town agree to the discharge of restrictive covenant number J122986 from the title of the property at 9429 Kenora Road, subject to the condition that prior to the town executing any discharge documents, the property owner of 9429 Kenora Road provides to the town a waiver release from the Strata Council of Strata Plan 761 Summergate Village Development. of any claim it might make against the town as a result of the town agreeing to the discharge.
I'll second.
We have it moved and seconded, and just for process, so if this motion carries, we do not have a motion with regards to the request, original request from the proponents, and so we would then need a motion to address it. But I just wanted to speak to process then.
Yeah.
This motion is on the floor. Do you wish to motivate, Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, in previous discussions we had on this at the 28th, I appreciate that staff provided some guidance in terms of legal advice that, you know, we might, it might be a good idea to get waivers from Summergate out of an abundance of caution. But they still felt comfortable that, you know, that wasn't necessarily required. Now that we've heard from Summergate a second time, saying that they're not in a position, they're not going to take a position on this, they don't see that they have a role in providing guidance on this. I think, you know, now the property owner is in a sort of a limbo zone. So I think we're the ones, the town is the one that put this in place. I think it's incumbent upon us to remove it. There doesn't appear to be any current need for it. That was outlined, it was originally in place 40 years ago. So I would think that we should remove the requirement for him to seek a waiver from Summergate, and I'll have a follow-up motion if this one passes.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to the seconder.
Yeah, just a question through you to staff. Is there any further legal implications you've come up, or are you comfortable with what's happening with this change?
Thank you. Through Mayor McNeil Smith to Councillor Duck, I don't want to speak for Ms. Verheit. This was a suggestion from our solicitor out of an abundance for caution, with caution, and so quite frankly, I think the risk is quite limited. So we're comfortable with, or I'm comfortable certainly with proceeding without the waiver letter. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. So I'm in support of this motion, and I assume, as Councillor O'Keefe has mentioned, there's a motion arising, and I think that we've done our due diligence and we should move on.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. I'll turn to Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you. I agree we've done our due diligence because we've, the question has been asked on the basis of this motion. The question has been asked. There's been correspondence between the applicant's lawyers and also the strata, and the strata's come back, and frankly, by taking no position, they have taken a position. They've got no comment on it. It's an agreement they've said they're not party to. Having said that, procedurally, because this motion was actioned, and because there was communication on the basis of this motion, are we doing the right thing by rescinding it? I'm not suggesting, you know, that there isn't a motion arising from the correspondence we've received. I just want to clarify that procedurally, staff are comfortable with what's being suggested.
Yeah, staff's comfortable with that. I mean, with the next motion ahead, I think that would clarify it all, right? But again, you could rescind it, or you could just amend the motion.
Okay, no, we'll stay the
Yep.
course, and I'll support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question on rescinding. All in favor? None are opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. Turn it back to Councillor O'Keefe.
Yeah, so motion rising. I'll move that the town agree to the discharge of restrictive covenant number J122986 from the title of the property at 9429 Kenora Road.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Turn to the mover. I think you've motivated.
I think we covered it.
Okay. Councillor Novak?
Again, I think the due diligence has been done. I think the exposure to the town is negligible, if any, and so I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? None opposed, motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now turn into correspondence for information. These will be the 8 remaining items on the agenda.
Moved receipt for information.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We have no notices of motion. We do have a motion to go in camera. Councillor Garnett?
I'll move that it is in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters respecting a potential litigation affecting the municipality pursuant to section 90.1G of the community charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries.
We have adjournment.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. We're adjourned. Thank you. We'll recess.